You are not yet awake, not fully, but the deepest layer of sleep is already lifted like a thin mist rising from the surface of a quiet river. Beneath your closed eyelids, there is only a soft, directionless darkness, warm and undemanding. Your body rests on a straw mattress that has over many years shaped itself to the curve of your spine and the weight of your shoulders. The mattress lies on a low wooden frame of simple construction, and it never creaks when you shift your weight because the joints have been worn smooth by time. The room around you is small, its walls built of pale limestone blocks cut from the hills east of the city and fitted together with mortar made of lime and sand and crushed pottery. These walls hold the coolness of the night deep inside their pores, and they release it slowly so that the air against your cheek stays fresh while you sleep. The ceiling is made of palm trunks split down the middle and laid side by side, their fibrous undersides darkened by years of lamp smoke and the gentle breath of many sleepers who came before you. There is a single window high in the wall, not a window of glass, but a lattice of turned wood pieces arranged in a geometric pattern, and through this lattice the last of the night's cool air seeps in, carrying with it the faint, powdery scent of dried earth from the courtyard below. The stars beyond the lattice are still bright and numerous, although anyone watching carefully would notice that they have begun to lose the hard diamond edge of midnight and are softening toward the grey veil that precedes dawn. You lie on your right side, your knees slightly bent, one arm folded beneath the rolled linen cloth that serves as your pillow. The wool blanket pulled up to your chin is undyed, the color of a storm cloud seen from a great distance. You are aware of its texture without thinking about it, the way the fibers have been carded and spun and woven by a hand that is not your own but is known to you. Perhaps a woman in a village on the Nile Delta who sits at a loom with her feet in the shade. The blanket is not heavy, but it is dense, and it traps a pocket of warmth that moves with you whenever you breathe. Your breathing is slow and even, so slow that if someone stood in the doorway and watched, they would see only the faintest rise and fall of the blanket's edge, like the surface of a lake stirred by a wind too soft to feel. You are not dreaming now. The images that wandered through your mind earlier have dissolved, leaving only a placid emptiness that is the most restful state of all. In this emptiness there is no past, no future, no list of duties to be done. There is only the mattress, the blanket, the cool air, and the distant, regular pulse of your own blood moving through the veins in your temples. The first thing that changes is not a sound, not a light, but a tiny shift inside your chest. It is as if some inner clock, wound by years of habit, has brushed a single finger against your heart. You do not open your eyes. Instead, you draw a breath that is slightly deeper than the ones before, a breath that fills the bottom of your lungs and then the top, and you let it go just as slowly. Your eyelids do not flutter, they remain shut, the lashes resting against the soft skin beneath your eyes. But behind them there is now a faint awareness, the knowledge that the darkness is no longer the darkness of midnight. The quality of the light pressing against your closed lids is different, a subtle shift from absolute black to a darkness tinged with the ghost of blue. The moon, which has traveled across the sky all night, is now low in the west and sends a single pale beam through the wooden lattice. That beam falls on the floor not far from your mattress, a rectangle of silver light that is broken into tiny diamond shapes by the lattice work, and it moves almost imperceptibly as the moon continues its slow descent. You can sense this light without looking at it, just as you can sense the position of your own limbs and the direction of the faint draft that crosses your ankles. Time passes without measure. You do not count heartbeats or minutes. There is only the slow drift from one state to another, from deep sleep to a shallow floating that is like being suspended in warm water. Your mind begins to collect the sounds of the world without urgency. The first sound is not a sound at all, but the absence of something. The dogs that had barked earlier in the night, somewhere down near the spice market, or perhaps along the canal, have fallen silent. There is no wind, no rustle of palm fronds. The city of Cairo, sprawling beyond the citadel walls in all its mud brick and limestone vastness, is utterly still, holding its breath. You hear the silence itself, and the silence has a texture, a smooth, velvety quality that seems to press gently against your eardrums. Into this silence a single sound eventually arrives, so faint that you might have imagined it, the distant hollow tap of a wooden shutter swinging closed somewhere far away, or perhaps a guard's staff touching the stones, or perhaps nothing at all. The sound does not repeat. It fades into memory before memory can grasp it, and the silence flows back in to fill the space it left. You become aware of the water jug. It sits on the stone floor beside your mattress, a round-bellied vessel of unglazed clay with a narrow neck and a looped handle. The clay is the color of light rust, and its surface is cool to the touch and slightly rough, like the skin of an orange dried in the sun. You know it is there even with your eyes closed, because you can smell it, the faint mineral scent of water slowly seeping through the porous clay and evaporating into the air. That scent mingles with the smell of the straw mattress, the wool blanket, the limestone walls, and a trace of something floral, perhaps dried lavender tucked into the folds of your bedding, or perhaps a bush blooming in a courtyard several walls away. All of these smells combine into a single comforting presence, the smell of home, of safety, of the place where you have slept for years. Your hand, which had been resting loosely on the blanket, moves a fraction of an inch. The movement is not deliberate. It is the body testing its readiness, a small signal from the brain to the fingers that asks without words, "Are we waking now?" The fingers curl slightly and then relax. The answer is not yet. You listen to the room. The limestone walls are so thick that they absorb almost everything, but if you concentrate, you can hear the faintest whisper of your own pulse in your ears, a soft shushing sound like a shell held to the ear. You can hear the tiny settling noises of the building itself, the nearly imperceptible creak of a wooden beam adjusting to the night's coolness, the minute contraction of mortar as the temperature drops 1 more degree before dawn. These sounds are so quiet that they exist just at the threshold of hearing, and they come and go without pattern. You do not strain to hear them. Your mind receives them passively, the way a still pond receives a fallen leaf. Eventually, because there is no reason to hurry and every reason to let the body find its own time, you open your eyes. The lids part slowly, and for a moment the darkness of the room seems complete again, until your pupils adjust, and the silver rectangle of moonlight on the floor reveals itself. You look at it without staring, your gaze resting on the diamond-shaped patches of light and shadow. The moonbeam has moved since you first became aware of it, sliding perhaps the width of a finger across the pale stone tiles. The tiles themselves are worn in the center, the surface polished by countless bare feet walking to and from the door over generations. You notice the subtle variation in their color. Some are cooler gray, others are warmer beige, and the hairline cracks that spread like forked lightning from the corner of one tile where a heavy object was once dropped. You notice all of this without thinking about it, because your mind is still moving at the slow speed of early waking, a speed at which every detail can be observed and then released. You shift your body. The movement begins in the hips, a gentle roll that transfers weight from the right side toward the back. The straw inside the mattress rustles, a dry, papery sound that is neither loud nor unpleasant. You straighten your legs slowly, one and then the other, feeling the muscles in your calves and thighs lengthen after hours of being bent. There is no ache, only a pleasant, dull awareness of the body, reporting that all is well, that the joints are lubricated, that the tendons are ready. You flex your toes against the wool blanket and feel the slight resistance of the fabric, then let them relax. Your arms move next, the one that was folded beneath the pillow sliding out into the cool air, the other rising from your side to rest on your stomach. The change in position brings a new sensation, a slight difference in temperature where the blanket has shifted and allowed a sliver of night air to touch your collarbone. The air is cool but not cold, perhaps the temperature of well water drawn at noon and left to sit in the shade. Now you are lying on your back, looking up at the palm trunk ceiling. The trunks are each about the thickness of a man's thigh, their surfaces rough and striated, and between them you can see the underside of the roofing material, a lattice of smaller sticks and packed mud that has cracked in places, creating a map of fine lines like the tributaries of a delta. You have looked at this ceiling thousands of times. You know every knot in the wood, every dark stain where rain leaked through many years ago before the roof was repaired, every place where a bit of straw pokes down from the mud. The familiarity of it is comforting, a fixed point in a world that is otherwise always changing. You let your eyes trace the familiar paths without expectation, and as you do, your breathing continues to flow in and out with the same slow rhythm. Time drifts again. The rectangle of moonlight has now moved so that its edge touches the leg of the wooden bed frame, throwing a thin shadow upward. The quality of the light has changed almost imperceptibly. The silver is now touched with a hint of grey, a sign that the moon is nearing the horizon and the sky is preparing to yield to the sun, although the sun is still far below the eastern desert. A rooster crows somewhere in the city, a distant, muffled sound that comes through the walls like a memory of a sound rather than the sound itself. The rooster is answered by another, even fainter, and then silence returns. The roosters are not your signal. Your signal comes from deeper within, from the same place that first brushed your heart and told it to draw a deeper breath. And now that signal repeats, a little more insistent this time, a gentle pressure at the base of your skull that says, "It is time to rise." You sit up. The movement is unhurried, a slow folding at the waist that brings your torso upright while your legs remain straight under the blanket. You pause there, sitting, your hands resting palms down on the mattress on either side of your hips. The blanket pools around your waist, the everyday heroes and the back of your neck, and you feel it as a slight tightening of the skin, a momentary goose flesh that fades almost immediately. Your eyes, now adjusted to the dimness, can see the rest of the small room more clearly, the wooden chest against the opposite wall, its iron hinges black against the pale wood. The niche carved into the wall beside the door where a small oil lamp sits unlit. The reed mat on the floor in the corner that you use for prayer. The simple wooden peg driven into the wall where your linen tunic hangs, ghostly pale in the near darkness. You look at each of these objects in turn, and each one is exactly as you left it the night before. The orderliness of the room is a quiet satisfaction, a confirmation that the world has continued to turn while you slept and has not rearranged itself into chaos. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The soles of your bare feet come to rest on the stone floor, and the stone is cool, much cooler than the air, and slightly textured, not polished smooth, but honed to a fine grain that provides a gentle grip. You let your feet rest there without moving, feeling the coolness travel up through the bones of your heels and into your ankles. The sensation is not unpleasant. It is grounding, a direct connection between your body and the limestone that was quarried from the earth. You sit on the edge of the bed for what feels like a long time, your back straight but not rigid, your hands now resting on your thighs. Your gaze has settled on the rectangle of moonlight on the floor, which has now faded further as the moon dips below the roofline, leaving only a diffuse glow. After a while, you stand. The motion is slow and fluid, a transfer of weight from the mattress to the feet that does not jar the spine or creak the wooden frame. You stand in the center of the small room, your head just below the palm trunk ceiling, your shoulders relaxed. The wool blanket remains on the bed, and you do not fold it or arrange it. There will be time for that later. You reach for the linen tunic that hangs on the wooden peg. The linen is smooth and cool to the touch, and it has the faint, clean smell of the sun in which it was dried after its last washing. You lift it from the peg and hold it in front of you, examining the simple garment, a long rectangle of fabric with a hole for the head and openings for the arms, sewn up the sides with strong flax thread. There are no buttons, no clasps, no ornamentation. The tunic is the color of unbleached cotton, a soft cream that in this light appears almost white. You pull it over your head in a single, unhurried motion, letting the fabric slide down over your shoulders and chest and settle around your hips. The tunic falls to just below your knees. You adjust it with a gentle tug at the hem to make sure it hangs straight, then smooth the fabric over your collarbones. Next, you reach for the cloth belt that hangs on a smaller peg beside the tunic. The belt is a long strip of woven cotton, about the width of your palm, dyed a faded indigo blue from many washings. You wrap it around your waist twice, pulling it snug but not tight, and tie a simple knot at the front, letting the loose ends hang down. The belt serves no purpose other than to gather the tunic slightly and to give your hands something familiar to touch. When it is tied, you stand still again, your arms at your sides. The room is exactly as it was, but you have changed. You are no longer a sleeping body in a bed. You are a man dressed and standing, ready to begin the day, although the day has not yet begun. You walk to the door. The door is made of thick planks of acacia wood, darkened with age, and it is set into a frame of limestone blocks. There is no handle, only a simple iron ring that is cold against your fingers. You do not open the door yet. You stand before it and listen. On the other side of the door is a long corridor, and on the other side of the corridor are other doors, and behind those doors are other men, your fellow horsemen, all of them still asleep or in the same slow state of waking that you have just passed through. The corridor is silent. There is no footstep, no murmur of voices, no clink of metal. The silence is total, and you let it wrap around you like a second garment. You feel the coolness of the stone floor under your bare feet, the weight of the tunic on your shoulders, the slight pressure of the belt at your waist, the steady, slow rhythm of your breathing. You are entirely present, entirely calm, and entirely alone in the most peaceful way possible. You turn from the door and walk to the small niche in the wall where the oil lamp sits. Beside the lamp is a clay bowl filled with water, covered with a small linen cloth to keep out dust. You remove the cloth and dip your fingers into the water. It is cool and clean, and you bring your wet fingers to your lips, touching them lightly. Then you splash a small amount of water onto your face, cupping your hand and letting the water run over your cheeks and forehead and chin. You do this slowly, 3 times, each time feeling the water draw away the last vestige of sleepiness and leave behind a cool, tight feeling on your skin. You dry your face with the linen cloth that covered the bowl, pressing it gently against your closed eyes for a moment before hanging it back on its peg. Now you are ready to leave the room, but still you do not hurry. You pick up your sandals, which you had left by the door the night before. They are simple sandals made of tanned cowhide, the straps soft and dark with use, the soles worn smooth. You do not put them on, you simply carry them in one hand, feeling their familiar weight. Your other hand reaches for the iron ring on the door, and you pause one final time, taking a slow breath that fills your lungs completely, and then releases it just as slowly. The breath is audible in the silence, a soft, steady sound like wind passing through distant reeds. When the breath is finished, you pull the door open, and the corridor beyond is dim and still and waiting, and you step out into the calm, suspended moment that exists only in the last quiet minutes before the call to prayer. You step out of your room and into the corridor, and the first thing you notice is the change in the air. Inside your room, the air had been still and close, warmed by your body and held in place by the thick limestone walls. Out here the air moves, a gentle current that flows from the courtyard end of the corridor toward the outer wall, and it carries with it a faint freshness, the suggestion of open space and the last coolness of the departing night. You close the door behind you without a sound, the acacia planks fitting snugly into the limestone frame, and you stand for a moment with your bare feet on the flagstones, letting the corridor receive you. The sandals are still in your left hand, their leather straps loop loosely around your fingers, and the weight of them is familiar and reassuring, a small anchor to the world of practical things. The corridor is long and straight, a passageway that connects the private sleeping quarters of the horsemen to the main courtyard and the stables beyond. The ceiling here is higher than in your room, arched in a gentle curve that rises to a point just above your upraised hand. The arch is made of bricks, small baked rectangles of reddish clay laid in a herringbone pattern, and the mortar between them has darkened over the years to a color somewhere between charcoal and old honey. In the day, sunlight filters through small openings high in the walls, but now in this last hour before dawn, the only illumination comes from a single oil lamp set into a niche halfway down the corridor. The lamp is a simple vessel of glazed pottery with a pinched spout that holds a cotton wick, and the flame burns steady and small, a spearhead of yellow light that barely troubles the surrounding darkness. The light it casts is limited, reaching perhaps an arm's length in every direction, before fading into a soft amber penumbra, and beyond that penumbra the corridor dissolves into shadow. You can see the lamp from where you stand, a warm point of reference in the dimness, and you begin to walk toward it without conscious decision, your feet moving as if they know the way. The flagstones under your soles are cool, much cooler than the air, and their surface is worn smooth by the passage of countless feet over many decades. Each stone is roughly square, about the length of your forearm, and they are fitted together with narrow joints filled with fine sand. You can feel the slight variations in level between one stone and the next, a subtle unevenness that your feet have long since memorized. The sensation of walking barefoot on these stones is pleasant, a gentle massage of the arches that wakes the muscles without any strain. You place your heel down first, then roll forward to the ball of the foot, then push off with the toes, a slow and measured gait that makes no sound. Your tunic brushes against your calves with each step, a soft whisper of linen on skin, and the knot of your indigo belt sways gently from side to side. The walls of the corridor are plastered with a pale gypsum wash that reflects the lamplight in a dim, pearlescent sheen. The plaster is cool to the touch, and as you walk you let the fingertips of your right hand trail lightly along the surface. You can feel the slight grain of the plaster, the occasional bump where a bit of straw was mixed into the gypsum, the smoother patches where generations of shoulders have rubbed against the wall. The wall is not featureless. There are shallow niches at regular intervals, each one carved into the limestone behind the plaster and framed with a simple border of incised lines. Some of the niches hold small objects, a chipped pottery cup turned upside down, a dried bundle of herbs tied with a string, a smooth river stone that someone placed there long ago and that no one has ever removed. You pass these niches one by one, and you do not stop to examine them because you've seen them all before, many times, and their presence is simply a part of the corridor's quiet character, like the lines on the palm of your own hand. You pass the first door on your left, a door identical to your own, made of the same dark acacia planks with the same iron ring handle. Behind that door another horseman sleeps, a man you have known for years, a man whose name is as familiar to you as your own, but whose presence you do not disturb. You do not pause at his door, nor do you quicken your pace. Your steps remain even and unhurried, and you move past the door with the same calm attention that you give to every other stone and shadow in the corridor. You know that behind that door is a room very like your room, with a straw mattress and a wool blanket and a clay water jug and a palm trunk ceiling. And you know that the man inside is lying in the same half-waking stillness that you recently left, his breathing slow, his eyes closed, his body slowly gathering itself for the day. The knowledge of his presence is a comfort, a reminder that you are not alone in the world, even though at this moment you are the only one awake and moving through the silent passageway. The corridor continues, and you continue with it. The lamp is closer now, and as you approach it, the quality of the light changes. It becomes warmer, more golden, and it picks out details that were invisible in the shadows, the fine crack in the plaster that runs from floor to ceiling like a dried riverbed, the small spiderweb that spans the corner of a niche, the tiny moth that rests on the wall near the lamp, its wings folded and still. The moth is the color of old parchment, and it does not move as you pass. The flame in the lamp flutters once as the air current from your movement reaches it, then steadies again, and the shadows on the wall sway briefly before settling. You stop beside the lamp. The niche that holds it is at the level of your chest, and you can look directly into the small pool of oil that surrounds the base of the wick. The oil is clear and pale, olive oil pressed from the groves that spread across the hills of the Levant, and it has a faint, fruity scent that mingles with the smell of the burning wick. You watch the flame for a moment, the way it rises in a steady point, the way its base glows blue before turning yellow, the way it consumes the oil without haste, drawing it up through the cotton fibers, one tiny drop at a time. There is a lesson in the flame, a reminder that all things proceed at their own pace, and that hurry is a kind of violence, but you do not formulate this thought in words. You simply absorb it, standing there with your sandals in your hand and the stillness of the corridor wrapped around you like a cloak. You leave the lamp behind and continue walking. The corridor opens into a slightly wider section where two passageways meet, a small intersection marked by a square archway supported by simple pillars. The pillars are limestone, unadorned, their corners softened by centuries of use, and the archway above them is made of the same reddish bricks as the ceiling. In the center of this small intersection, set into the floor, is a circular grate made of iron bars, and below the grate is a cistern that collects rainwater from the roof. You can hear the faintest sound of dripping water, a single drop falling from somewhere above into the dark pool below, and the sound is so regular and so soft that it might be the heartbeat of the building itself. You pause at the intersection and look down through the grate, but you can see nothing. The cistern is deep and dark, and the lamp's light does not reach its depths. The air here is slightly cooler and smells of damp stone, a clean, mineral scent that rises from the cistern and mingles with the corridor's usual dry stillness. You stand there for a few long breaths, listening to the drip, feeling the cool air on your face, and then you turn to the right, following the corridor as it leads toward the stable courtyard. The floor changes subtly underfoot. The flagstones here are a little rougher, less worn, because fewer feet travel this section. You notice the difference immediately, the slight increase in texture against your soles, the occasional small pebble that has been tracked in from outside and never swept away. You walk around these pebbles without thinking, your feet automatically finding the smoothest path. The walls here are not plastered, the limestone blocks are exposed, their surfaces marked with the chisel marks of the masons who cut them from the quarry. You can see the faint horizontal grooves where the chisels bit into the stone, and you can see the small fossil shells embedded in the limestone, spirals and scallops that once lay on the floor of a primordial sea. You've looked at these fossils many times, and each time you feel a quiet connection to the deep past, to the unimaginable stretches of time that preceded your own small existence. The feeling is not one of insignificance, but of belonging, of being part of a chain of being that stretches backward and forward beyond all reckoning. As you approach the end of the corridor, the darkness begins to lift. The source of this new light is not the lamp behind you, but the open archway ahead, a tall opening that leads directly into the stable courtyard. The sky beyond the archway is still dark, but it is a different kind of darkness. A darkness that is already beginning to thin at its edges, infused with the first pale hint of the dawn that is still some time away. The archway itself is large, wide enough for two horses to pass through side by side, and it is framed by massive limestone blocks that have been dressed smooth. Above the arch is a carved medallion, a simple geometric pattern of interlaced circles, worn by weather and time, but still visible if you know where to look. The floor beneath the archway is a single large slab of stone, slightly hollowed in the center where countless hooves and feet have passed, and it is on this slab that you have left your sandals every night for as long as you can remember. You stop at the edge of the archway and look down. Your sandals are there, exactly where you placed them the night before. They sit side by side on the smooth stone, the left sandals slightly overlapping the right, the leather straps curled inward from being removed in a hurry, although you do not remember being in a hurry. You had taken them off as you entered the sleeping quarters, wanting to feel the cool stone under your feet after a long day, and you had left them here, knowing that you would find them again in the morning. The sight of them is satisfying in a small, quiet way, a confirmation that the order you established the night before has persisted through the hours of darkness. You stand looking at the sandals for a moment, and then you bend down slowly, lowering yourself by bending your knees, and you place your right hand on the slab to steady yourself. The stone is cold and smooth under your palm, and you can feel the shallow depression worn by centuries of use, a depression that fits your hand, as if it were made for it. You pick up the sandals one at a time, the left first and then the right, and you hold them both in your hands, feeling their weight, their texture, their perfect familiarity. The sandals are simple things, as simple as the tunic and the belt. They consist of a thick leather sole cut to the shape of a foot, and a series of straps that pass over the instep and around the heel. The leather is cowhide, tanned with acacia bark until it has turned a deep, rich brown, and the edges are burnished smooth. The soles are worn thin in places, especially under the ball of the foot and the heel, and you can see the faint impression of your own toes stamped into the leather. The straps are soft and pliable, and the stitching that holds them to the sole is made of twisted flax thread, waxed to resist moisture. You have owned these sandals for many years. They were made for you by a leather worker in the market district below the citadel, a man with a hunchback and gentle hands who measured your feet with a strip of palm leaf and delivered the finished sandals wrapped in a piece of old linen. You remember that day, the smell of the tannery, the sound of the leather worker's hammer tapping against his anvil, the warmth of the sun on the back of your neck. The memory is a pleasant one, and it drifts through your mind without lingering, a leaf floating on the surface of a slow stream. You set the sandals down on the stone again, side by side, and you straighten up, your knees making no sound. Now you walk a few steps to the left of the archway, where a small alcove has been built into the wall. The alcove contains a brass basin mounted on a stone pedestal, and above the basin a clay jar rests on a wooden shelf, its spout angled downward. The jar holds water for washing, filled each evening by the servants who tend the stables. You reach up and tilt the jar slightly, and a stream of water pours out, thin and clear, splashing into the brass basin with a soft ringing sound. You let the water run over your hands, cupping them together to form a pool, and you splash the water onto your face once, twice, 3 times. The water is cooler than the water in your room, having sat in the clay jar near the open archway all night, and it draws a sharp breath from your lungs, a quick inhalation that is not unpleasant, but invigorating. You feel the water run down your cheeks and drip from your chin onto the front of your tunic, where it leaves small dark spots that will dry in a few minutes. You rub your wet hands over the back of your neck, feeling the coolness there, and then you dry your hands on the sides of your tunic, which is rough enough to serve as a towel. The ritual of washing is simple but complete. There is no soap, no fragrance, only water, and the cool night air and the first faint lightening of the sky beyond the archway. You stand beside the basin for a while, letting your face dry naturally, feeling the moisture evaporate and leave behind a tight, clean sensation. The air in the archway is fresher than the air in the corridor, and it carries the scent of the courtyard, the dry smell of packed earth, the green smell of the jasmine that climbs the pillars of the arcade, the warm animal smell of horses sleeping in their stalls. These scents mingle together into a single, complex fragrance that is the smell of the stable, the smell of your daily life, the smell of your daily life, the smell of the world you have chosen, and that has chosen you. You breathe it in deeply, and your lungs accept it as they accept everything else this morning, without resistance, without hurry, without any emotion stronger than a quiet, steady contentment. Now you return to the sandals. You stand before them as you have stood before them on countless other mornings, and you slip your feet into them one at a time. You place your right foot on the sole and pull the straps over your instep, tucking the loose end under the cross strap to hold it in place. The leather is cool and stiff at first, but it warms quickly against your skin, and after a few seconds it feels as if it is part of your foot. You repeat the process with your left foot, bending down to adjust the heel strap, so that it sits perfectly against your Achilles tendon. When both sandals are secure, you stand upright and feel the slight elevation of the soles between you and the stone, a thin barrier of leather that will protect your feet from the rougher ground of the courtyard. The sensation is familiar and good, the final piece of your morning preparation. You are now fully dressed, fully awake, fully ready to step through the archway and into the courtyard where your horse waits, but still you do not move. You stand at the threshold, your hands resting loosely at your sides, your eyes gazing out through the arch at the rectangle of sky that is just beginning to separate itself from the silhouette of the arcade. The stars are fading now, one by one, as if someone is slowly turning down the wick of a vast lamp. The courtyard beyond is still hidden in shadow, but you can sense its openness, its spaciousness, its quiet population of sleeping animals and patient tools. The moment is suspended, a pause between two phases of the morning, and you let it stretch out around you, knowing that the next step will carry you into the rest of the day. But that for now, in this perfect, unhurried instant, there is nowhere else you need to be and nothing else you need to do. You step through the archway, and the world opens around you in a quiet rush of space and cool air. The transition from the enclosed corridor to the open courtyard is like passing through a membrane, a moment when the closeness of walls and ceilings falls away and the sky, still dark but now directly overhead, seems to rise upward without limit. You pause just beyond the threshold, your sandals resting on the packed earth of the courtyard floor, and you let the new dimensions of the space settle around you. The courtyard is a wide rectangle, large enough to hold many horses and many men, and it is bordered on all four sides by an arcade of arched pillars that support a low roof of palm trunks and mud brick. The arches are simple and unornamented, each one a perfect semicircle resting on square limestone pillars, and in the darkness they appear as a series of dark mouths opening onto a deeper darkness beyond. The sky above the courtyard is a vast, inverted bowl, its color a deep indigo at the zenith that graduates through layers of blue and charcoal to a thin line of pale grey at the eastern edge. The stars are still visible, but they have lost the fierce brilliance of midnight and now shine with a softer, more distant light, as if they are withdrawing to a greater distance. There is no moon. It is already set behind the western walls, and its absence makes the stars seem more numerous, tiny points of cold silver scattered across the dome of the sky in patterns that you have known since childhood. You stand still just inside the courtyard and let your senses extend outward. The ground beneath your sandals is a mixture of hard-packed earth and fine gravel, swept clean each evening by the stable hands and left to settle overnight. The surface is uneven in places, with shallow depressions where rainwater once pooled and dried, and the texture is slightly gritty, a sensation that comes through the leather soles as a muted crunch when you shift your weight. The air in the courtyard is cooler than the air in the corridor, cooled further by the open sky and by the evaporation of water from the fountain in the center. It moves in slow, almost imperceptible currents, drifting from the eastern arcade toward the west, carrying with it the mingled scents of the stable, the dry, sweet smell of hay stacked in the storeroom, the sharper tang of horse urine absorbed into the earthen floor and covered with fresh straw, the faint, metallic scent of iron from the tools hanging on the walls, and beneath all of these, the green, living scent of the jasmine that climbs the pillars and sends its fragrance out in gentle pulses whenever the air stir. You breathe in through your nose, slowly, letting the air fill the deepest parts of your lungs, and you hold it there for a moment before releasing it, just as slowly. The breath is a kind of greeting, an acknowledgement of the space you have entered. The courtyard is not empty, but its inhabitants are asleep. On three sides of the rectangle between the pillars of the arcade are the horse stalls, simple enclosures built of wooden rails and divided by partitions of woven palm fronds. Each stall has a low door that opens onto the courtyard, and above each door is a small window cut into the wall of the arcade to let in light and air. The stalls are dark. The horses within them are resting, some standing with their heads lowered, others lying on the thick beds of straw that the stable hands spread each evening. You can hear their breathing, a collective sound that rises and falls like a slow tide, the deep rhythmic exhalations of large animals at rest. Occasionally a hoof shifts, scraping softly against the packed earth, or a tail swishes against a wooden rail. But these sounds are so quiet and so occasional that they seem like part of the silence rather than interruptions of it. You know that your own horse is in the third stall on the left, but you do not walk there yet. There is no urgency, no sense that the horse requires your immediate attention. The animal is resting peacefully, and you have time to simply be in the courtyard, to absorb its stillness before the day's routines begin. In the center of the courtyard, directly under the open sky, is the fountain. It is a simple structure, a circular basin of carved limestone raised on a low plinth of 3 steps, with a central pillar that supports a smaller basin at waist height. Water flows from a spout in the central pillar, a thin, steady stream that arcs downward into the main basin, with a sound that is somewhere between a trickle and a murmur. The water has been flowing all night, as it flows every night, fed by a cistern on the roof that collects the rare rains, and by an underground channel that brings water from the Nile filter through layers of sand and gravel until it emerges clear and cold. The sound of the fountain is the dominant sound in the courtyard, a constant, gentle note that underlies all other sounds and silences. It is a sound that you have heard 1,000 times, and it is as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. The falling water catches the faint starlight and seems to glow faintly as it descends, a thin silver thread suspended in the darkness. The surface of the water in the basin is rippled with concentric circles that spread outward from the point of impact and dissipate against the stone rim. The ripples catch the starlight in a way that makes the water appear to be full of moving points of light, tiny stars that are born and extinguished in an instant. You walk toward the fountain, your sandals making a soft, rhythmic sound on the packed earth, a sound that is absorbed by the open air and does not echo. The distance from the archway to the fountain is perhaps 20 paces, but you cover it slowly, each step deliberate and balanced, as if you were walking through water. You are in no hurry. The night sky above you continues its slow, imperceptible transformation. The eastern edge, lightening by degrees so subtle that you cannot see the change happening, but can only sense that it has happened when you look away and look back. The stars directly overhead are still bright, but those near the horizon have begun to fade, their light overwhelmed by the approaching dawn, even though the sun itself is still far below the edge of the world. A planet, perhaps Jupiter or Venus, hangs low in the east like a steady white lamp, the last celestial body to yield to the morning. You notice it as you walk, its unwavering light a fixed point in the slowly shifting sky, and you feel a quiet kinship with it, another solitary presence keeping watch over the sleeping world. You reach the fountain and stop at the edge of the lowest step. The limestone is cool under your hand when you reach out to touch it, and the surface is smooth except for a few places where the stone has been chipped and the underlying grain is exposed. The steps are shallow, each one rising only a few inches, and you climb them one at a time, placing each foot carefully and feeling the slight change in elevation. At the top of the steps, you stand on the plinth that surrounds the main basin, a circular platform wide enough to walk around. The water in the basin is dark and clear, and as you look into it, you see your own reflection, a pale oval face under a dark cap of hair, the shoulders of your tunic, the faint outline of the arcade behind you. The reflection wavers slightly as the ripples pass over it, distorting your features into a series of gentle curves and elongations, then returning them to their proper shape. You watch this for a while, the way the water holds your image and releases it, holds it and releases it, a slow, hypnotic dance that requires nothing from you but attention. You cup your hands and lower them into the basin. The water is colder than you expected, cold enough to make the skin of your wrists tighten and a brief shiver travel up your arms. You hold your hands under the surface for a moment, letting the cold soak into your fingers and palms, feeling the tiny currents of the water moving between your fingers. Then you lift your cupped hands to your mouth, water dripping from between your fingers and falling back into the basin with small, distinct plinks. You drink. The water tastes of stone, a clean, mineral taste with no hint of mud or vegetation, and it is so cold that you can feel it travel down your throat and into your chest, a line of coolness that spreads outward through your body. You drink again, a second mouthful, and then a third, each one smaller than the last, until your thirst is satisfied. The act of drinking is simple and ancient, a connection to every other person who has ever cupped water from a fountain in the dark before dawn, and you do it with the same unthinking reverence that you bring to all the small rituals of your morning. After drinking, you lower your hands into the water again, this time not to drink, but simply to feel. You let your hands rest on the surface, palms down, and the water supports them with a slight buoyant pressure. You push down gently and feel the resistance increase, the water pressing back against your palms with a soft, even force. You swirl your hands slowly, watching the ripples spread outward and disturb the reflection of the stars on the surface. The stars on the water break apart into fragments of light that scatter and rejoin, a silent, miniature cosmos that you can shape with the slightest movement of your fingers. You lift your hands out of the water and watch the droplets fall from your fingertips, each one catching the starlight for an instant before disappearing into the dark basin. The water runs down your wrists and soaks into the cuffs of your tunic, leaving a dark band of moisture that will dry in the air. You do not shake your hands. You simply hold them above the basin and let the water drip away at its own pace. Now you turn away from the fountain and look again at the courtyard. Your eyes have adjusted fully to the darkness, and you can see details that were invisible when you first entered. The tools hanging on the far wall, a row of leather buckets turned upside down to dry, a coil of rope looped over a wooden peg, a pile of clean straw heaped against the wall of the arcade, the brass fittings on the stall doors catching the faint starlight. The courtyard is orderly and quiet, everything in its place, the result of the evening's labours and the preparation for the day to come. The orderliness is a comfort, a visual confirmation that the world is stable and predictable, that the chaos of life is held at bay by the simple discipline of putting things back where they belong. You walk a slow circuit of the courtyard, starting at the fountain and moving clockwise, your sandals leaving faint impressions in the packed earth that will be swept away later in the morning. You walk past the first stall, where a grey mare stands with her head over the low door, her eyes half closed and her ears relaxed. You do not stop to pet her, you simply note her presence, the familiar curve of her neck, the pale dapples on her coat that are just visible in the dim light. The mare does not react to your passage. She is accustomed to the early morning footsteps and knows that they do not signal any immediate action. You pass the second stall, where a younger horse, a bay gelding, lies on his side in the straw, his legs folded under him and his breath stirring the loose chaff on the floor. His sleep is deep, and he does not stir as you walk by. You pass the storeroom, a larger enclosure at the far end of the courtyard where the hay is stacked in bales tied with palm fibre ropes, and the scent of dried clover and timothy grass is strong enough to make you pause and breathe it in. The hay is good quality, green and sweet, cut from the fields along the Nile and brought up to the citadel on the backs of donkeys. You can see the bales stacked neatly against the back wall, their rough edges catching the starlight. You continue your circuit, passing the tack room door, which is slightly ajar and from which emanates the rich, oily scent of leather and neat's foot oil. You do not enter. You will come here later to retrieve your saddle. For now, you simply note the door and the scent and continue walking. You pass the remaining stalls where more horses rest, each one a quiet presence in the darkness, each one known to you by name and temperament and the particular way it holds its head. The horses are the center of your life, the reason for your training and your position, and you feel a quiet gratitude for their presence. A gratitude that is too deep for words and that expresses itself only in the care you take with every action, every brushstroke, every adjustment of a strap. The gratitude is not a thought, it is a state of being, a low, steady hum that runs underneath all your other thoughts like the sound of the fountain. When you have completed your circuit and returned to the fountain, the sky has changed. The line of pale grey at the eastern edge has broadened and lightened, now a band of soft pearl that stretches from the northern horizon to the south. The stars above that band have disappeared entirely, swallowed by the growing light, and those higher in the sky have grown fainter, their light diluted. The planet low in the east still shines, but its brilliance is now matched by the sky around it, and soon it too will fade. The courtyard is no longer in total darkness. The objects in it have begun to acquire shape and colour. The grey mare now distinctly grey rather than a shadow among shadows, the green of the jasmine leaves now a muted olive rather than black, the warm brown of the stall doors now visible as brown. The transition from night to dawn is happening, and it is happening in silence, without any sudden event. A slow, continuous unfolding that you are privileged to witness simply by standing still and paying attention. You sit down on the edge of the fountain, on the lowest step where the stone is cool but not cold, and you look up at the sky. Your hands rest on your knees, and your breathing is slow and even. You feel the solidity of the stone beneath you, the weight of your body pressing down, the slight tension in your thighs from the short climb. The fountain continues its quiet murmur behind you, the water falling and falling and falling, an endless, patient sound that asks nothing and offers everything. The jasmine scent intensifies as the air begins to move more, a breeze that stirs as the earth rotates toward the sun, and you let the fragrance wash over you, a sweetness that is never cloying, always clean. The horses shift in their stalls, a few of them now fully awake and waiting, their ears pricked forward, their eyes watching the first light with the calm patience of animals who live entirely in the present moment. They do not call to you, they simply wait. You remain there on the fountain's edge for a time that you do not measure. The light continues to grow, spreading upward from the eastern horizon, its colors shifting from pearl to pale gold to a faint rose that tints the undersides of the few clouds that hang high in the atmosphere. Clouds that are invisible by day, but now reveal themselves as thin streaks of vapor catching the first rays of the sun that has not yet risen. The stone walls of the courtyard begin to warm in color, the pale limestone taking on a honeyed tone that deepens the shadows in the arches. The brass fittings on the stall doors gleam with a muted shine, and the water in the fountain catches the new light and seems to glow from within, a translucent, liquid gold that spills from the spout and shatters into the basin. The courtyard is transforming, not into something different, but into a more vivid version of itself. The details that were hidden now revealed, the textures and colors that were only potential now actual. And you, sitting on the fountain step, are part of this transformation, a still center in the slow turning of the world. A man who has done nothing more remarkable than wake up and walk outside, and who has found in that simple sequence of actions a peace so complete that it needs no name. The fountain step holds you in a comfortable stillness, your weight settled evenly on the cool limestone, your hands resting palms down on your knees. The sky above the courtyard has continued its slow brightening, the band of pearl at the eastern horizon now spreading upward and outward, pushing back the indigo darkness until only the zenith retains the deep color of night. The stars that remained a few minutes ago have now faded almost entirely, leaving behind a single bright point directly overhead, a planet, or perhaps a very distant star that will linger for a few more minutes before the growing light erases it as well. The courtyard around you is no longer a place of shadows and suggestions, but a place of solid forms and emerging colors. The pillars of the arcade now distinctly pale against the darker recesses of the stalls. The packed earth of the floor now visibly tan rather than grey. The green of the jasmine leaves now a definite olive hue, with the faintest sheen of dew on the upper surfaces. The horses in the stalls have stirred more noticeably, a few of them now standing fully alert, their heads turned toward the courtyard, their ears swiveling forward to catch the small sounds of the morning. You can hear the occasional soft blow of breath through a horse's nostrils, a puff of air that stirs the straw and carries a warm grassy scent across the courtyard to where you sit. The fountain continues its endless murmur behind you, the water catching the new light and throwing small shifting reflections onto the underside of the palm trunk roof above the arcade. You decide it is time to light the lantern. The decision is not prompted by any external signal but by a simple inner recognition that the next phase of the morning has arrived. You rise from the fountain step slowly, straightening your legs and feeling the slight stiffness in your knees from sitting on the stone, a stiffness that will dissolve with movement. You walk around the basin to the far side of the fountain, where a wrought iron hook has been driven into the limestone plinth, and on this hook hangs a brass lantern. The lantern is a simple object, cylindrical in shape, about the height of your forearm from base to top, with a pierced metal shade that protects the flame from the wind while allowing the light to shine through in a pattern of small diamond-shaped openings. The brass is old and has developed a dark patina over the years, a deep brownish gold that shows traces of green verdigris in the crevices and around the hinges. The lantern has a small door on one side that opens on a latch, and inside the door is a shallow reservoir of oil and a cotton wick threaded through a narrow brass tube. The glass chimney, when present, has been removed. In this sheltered courtyard, the pierced metal shade is enough to protect the flame, and the glass is only needed on windy nights or when riding out beyond the walls. You lift the lantern from the hook and feel its weight in your hand, the solid heft of the brass, the slight slosh of the oil in the reservoir. The metal is cool to the touch, having hung in the open air all night, and the coolness seeps into your palm and fingers as you carry the lantern to a small stone ledge set into the nearest pillar of the arcade. On the ledge you have placed the tools for lighting the lantern. A small arrangement that has been there since the evening before. There is a flat piece of hardened steel, dark grey and slightly curved to fit the hand, its striking edge worn bright from countless impacts. There is a piece of flint, a nodule of blackish-grey stone with a waxy luster and a sharp edge where it has been knapped to expose a fresh surface. There is a small tin box containing charred cloth, squares of linen that have been burned in a closed vessel until they are black and fragile, ready to catch a spark and hold it as an ember. And there is a wooden splinter, a thin sliver of pine wood tipped with a tiny amount of sulphur, which will be used to transfer the flame from the charred cloth to the lantern's wick. You arrange these items on the ledge with the care of long habit, placing the tin box on the left, the flint and steel on the right, the splinter in the center. The ledge is at waist height, perfectly positioned for the task, its surface worn smooth by the repetition of this same ritual on hundreds of mornings. You take the flint in your left hand, gripping it between your thumb and forefinger with the sharp edge facing outward. You take the steel in your right hand, your fingers curling around the curved back of the striker. You open the tin box and remove a single piece of charred cloth, handling it gently because it is as delicate as a dried leaf and will crumble if pressed too hard. You fold the cloth loosely and hold it against the sharp edge of the flint with the thumb of your left hand, positioned so that the sparks will fly directly onto the blackened fibers. Then you strike. The motion is quick and practiced, a downward flick of the wrist that brings the steel across the edge of the flint, and the spray of sparks erupts from the contact. Tiny molten shards of steel that glow orange-white for a fraction of a second. The first strike does not catch the cloth. The sparks fly wide and disappear against the stone ledge. You adjust the position of the cloth slightly and strike again. This time a single spark lands on the charred linen, and a tiny orange ember appears, a point of light no bigger than a grain of millet. You lower the steel and flint to the ledge and bring the ember close to your face, cupping your hand around it to shield it from the faint breeze that moves through the courtyard. The ember glows steadily, feeding on the charred fibers, and you watch it grow from a grain to a circle the size of a lentil, its color shifting from orange to a deep, steady red. The charred cloth smolders without flame, releasing a thin wisp of smoke that curls upward and vanishes, carrying the faint, acrid scent of burnt linen. Now you take the wooden splinter and touch its sulphur-coated tip to the ember. The sulphur melts with a tiny hiss and ignites, producing a small blue flame that immediately transitions to yellow as it catches the wood. The flame is fragile and wavers in the air, but it holds, and you use it to light the wick of the lantern. You open the small brass door, hold the splinter to the cotton wick, and watch as the oil-soaked fibers catch the flame and begin to burn with a steady, golden light. The flame starts small, a thin tongue of fire that flickers and dances, but as the oil is drawn up through the wick, it grows stronger, settling into a teardrop shape that rises to a point. You close the brass door and adjust the wick with a small knob on the side of the lantern, turning it until the flame is the right height, not so high that it produces smoke and not so low that it gutters in the breeze. The lantern is now lit and it casts a warm amber glow that pushes back the grey dawn light and creates a small circle of illumination around where you stand. The pierced metal shade throws patterns of light onto the stone ledge, diamonds and small crosses that overlap and shimmer as the flame moves. You blow out the wooden splinter with a soft puff of breath and set the charred cloth back into the tin box, closing the lid to extinguish the ember and preserve the remaining cloth for another use. The flint and steel go back into their places on the ledge, arranged neatly side by side. The ritual of lighting the lantern is complete, and you feel the quiet satisfaction that comes from performing a familiar task with care and attention, a satisfaction that is not pride, but simply a sense of rightness, of the world proceeding as it should. You lift the lantern by its wire handle and turn toward the stalls. The light moves with you, a traveling pool of warmth that illuminates the packed earth at your feet and the lower portions of the pillars as you pass them. The arcade, which was grey and dim a moment ago, now reveals its details in the lantern light, the chisel marks on the limestone blocks, the small nests of dried mud built by swallows under the eaves, the iron rings set into the pillars where horses can be tethered for grooming. The lantern light is a companion as you walk, a small warm presence that makes the dark corners of the courtyard recede and brings the familiar world into focus. You hold the lantern at waist height, and its weight is a steady, grounding influence on your arm, a small physical anchor that keeps your attention in the present moment. You cross the courtyard in a diagonal path, heading toward the row of stalls on the left side. The fountain is behind you now, its sound fading slightly as you move away, but still present as a continuous, gentle background note. The horses in the stalls have noticed your approach. You can hear the subtle changes in their breathing, the slight shifts of weight, the soft rustle of straw as they turn their heads to watch the approaching light. A horse's vision is keen in low light, better than your own, and they have known you were coming long before the lantern flame appeared. They do not call out. They are too well trained and too accustomed to the morning routine, but their attention is on you. A collective awareness that you can feel as a faint pressure on the back of your neck, the sensation of being watched by calm, patient eyes. You pass the first stall, where the grey mare stands with her head lowered over the door, her large dark eyes catching the lantern light and reflecting it back as two golden circles. She blinks slowly, her long eyelashes sweeping down and up, and she exhales a soft breath that stirs the fine hairs on the back of your hand. You pause for a moment and touch her muzzle lightly with your free hand, feeling the velvety softness of the skin, the slight moisture around the nostrils, the warm pulse of blood beneath the surface. The mare accepts the touch without moving, her ears relaxed, her lower lip drooping slightly in a sign of contentment. You withdraw your hand and continue walking, leaving her to her quiet waiting. The second stall holds the young bay gelding, who is now standing as well, his head turned toward the courtyard with an alert, curious expression. His ears are pricked forward, and his nostrils flare as he takes in the scent of the lantern smoke and the charred cloth and your own familiar human smell. He is a younger horse, not yet fully trained, and there is a slight tension in his posture, a readiness to move that the older horses have learned to suppress. You do not stop at his stall, you simply note his condition, the clearness of his eyes, the healthy sheen of his coat, and you file this observation away with all the other observations you have made this morning. And now you reach the third stall on the left, the one that you have been moving towards since you first stepped out of your room. The lantern light reaches into the stall before you do, pushing through the gaps in the wooden rails and illuminating the interior with a soft golden glow. And there, standing in the center of the stall, with the same quiet patience it has shown on every other morning, is your horse. The animal is a gelding, a chestnut with a coat the color of polished copper, its mane and tail a slightly darker shade of brown, its legs long and clean with no white markings. It is not a particularly large horse, but it is strong and compact, with a deep chest and a broad hindquarters and a neck that arches gracefully from the withers to the poll. The horse has been awake for some time, perhaps even before you left your room, and it has been waiting without impatience, without stamping or calling, simply standing in the straw with its weight evenly distributed on all four legs, its head turned slightly toward the door. The lantern light gleams on the horse's coat, picking out the highlights on the curve of the shoulder and the hip, and it catches the dark liquid surface of the horse's eye, an eye that is watching you with calm recognition. You stand at the stall door and look at your horse, and the horse looks back at you. There is a long moment of mutual regard, a silent exchange that needs no words and no gestures. The horse knows you as well as you know yourself, perhaps better. It knows the sound of your footsteps, the smell of your skin, the particular way you move when you are calm or tired or alert. It has carried you across deserts and through city streets, stood patiently while you mounted and dismounted, responded to the slightest pressure of your knees or shift of your weight. The horse's life and your life are intertwined, two threads that have been wound together so tightly that they cannot be separated. The bond between you is not sentimental, it is practical and deep, built on years of mutual reliance and mutual care. The horse depends on you for food and water, and shelter and protection from harm. You depend on the horse for speed and strength, and the ability to perform your duties. But beyond this practical interdependence, there is something else, something harder to name, a simple, quiet affection, a pleasure in each other's company that expresses itself in the horse's relaxed ears and the way you let your hand rest on its warm neck. The horse makes a sound, a low, rumbling nicker that seems to come from deep within its chest. The sound is quiet, barely audible, and it is meant only for you. It is a greeting, a recognition, a statement that all is well and that the horse is ready for whatever the morning will bring. You feel the sound as much as you hear it, a vibration that travels through the wooden rails and into your hand. You set the lantern down on the stone ledge outside the stall, positioning it so that the light shines through the gaps in the rails and illuminates the interior. Then you lift the simple wooden latch that holds the stall door closed, a latch made of a single piece of acacia wood that slides into an iron bracket, and you pull the door open just wide enough to slip inside. The straw inside the stall is thick and clean, laid down fresh the evening before by the stable hands. It rustles under your sandals as you step in, a dry, papery sound that is one of the most familiar sounds in your world. The stall is not large, but it is large enough for the horse to turn around and lie down, with a low manger at the back filled with hay and a bucket of water hanging from a hook on the wall. The walls are the same limestone as the rest of the courtyard, and the floor is packed earth covered with the straw. The air inside the stall is warm from the horse's body heat, and it carries the rich, sweet smell of the animal, a smell that is a combination of clean sweat and hay and the faint, musky scent of horse skin. It is a smell that you have known for so long that you no longer notice it unless you pay attention, and now, paying attention, you find it deeply comforting, the smell of trust and partnership and the quiet center of your daily life. You close the stall door behind you and stand still, letting the horse adjust to your presence inside its space. The horse turns its head to look at you, its eyes soft and dark, and then it turns its head back to the front, satisfied that you are here and that the morning's routine has begun. You reach out and place your palm flat on the horse's shoulder, feeling the warmth of the skin through the short, fine hairs. The muscle beneath your hand is firm and relaxed, twitching slightly as a fly lands and is shaken off. You can feel the horse's heartbeat, a slow, steady rhythm that is slower than your own, each beat a deep, solid thump that you can count if you choose to. You do not count. You simply stand there with your hand on the horse's shoulder, feeling the life that flows under the skin, feeling the calmness that flows back into your own body from the contact. The lantern outside the stall flickers softly as a breath of wind passes through the courtyard, and the shadows in the stall sway gently, and you remain where you are, motionless, your hand on the warm, living hide of the animal that you have come to care for, the first touch of many that will make up this slow, peaceful morning. The stall door closes behind you with a soft click of wood against wood, the latch dropping into its iron bracket with the ease of long practice. You are now inside the stall with your horse, the two of you standing together in the small, warm space that is the animal's private domain. The straw beneath your sandals is thick and clean, a golden beige color in the lantern light that seeps through the gaps in the rails, and it shifts under your weight with a gentle crackling sound. The horse has not moved since you entered. It stands with its head facing the door, its ears relaxed and slightly askew, its tail hanging still against its hindquarters. The animal's breathing is deep and regular, a slow rise and fall of the ribs that you can see even in the dim light, and each exhalation sends a small puff of warm air into the cooler air of the stall, where it condenses briefly into a ghost of vapor before disappearing. The warmth of the horse's body has filled the stall all night, and now that warmth wraps around you as you stand there, a gentle animal heat that is different from the heat of a fire or the sun, softer and more alive, a heat that carries with it the steady pulse of a large, calm heart. You stand still just inside the door and let the stall settle around you. The space is small but not cramped, designed to give the horse enough room to turn around and lie down without wasting any of the valuable courtyard area. The walls are the same pale limestone as the rest of the courtyard, but here they have been left unplastered, and you can see the rough texture of the stone, the small chisel marks that fan out from the edges of each block, the occasional dark spot of dampness near the floor where the water bucket sometimes sloshes over. The back wall of the stall has a small window cut high up, just below the arcade roof, and through this window the first grey light of dawn is beginning to filter in, a pale, diffuse glow that is not yet bright enough to cast shadows, but is bright enough to soften the darkness. The window is covered with a wooden lattice similar to the one in your room, and the light that comes through it is broken into small pale squares that fall on the back wall and fade before reaching the floor. The manger is built into the corner, a simple wooden trough filled with hay that spills over the edges in soft, greenish gold wisps. The hay smells sweet and dry, a summer smell that lingers in the stall even in the depths of winter. The water bucket hangs from an iron hook driven into the wall, its wooden staves dark with moisture, and the surface of the water inside is perfectly still, a small, round mirror that reflects the dim light of the window. The horse turns its head slightly, not enough to look at you directly, but enough to acknowledge your presence with the movement of one ear, which swivels back toward you and then forward again. The ear is lined with fine, soft hairs that catch the lantern light, and you can see the delicate veins that run through the pink skin inside. The horse's mane falls over the right side of its neck, a cascade of dark brown hair that is slightly tangled from the night's rest, and the hair moves gently as the horse shifts its weight from one hind leg to the other. The shift is a tiny movement, barely perceptible, a relaxation of one hip and the engagement of the other, and it makes the muscles under the skin ripple in a slow wave that travels from the croup down to the stifle. You watch this wave with the same calm attention that you have given to everything else this morning, and you find in it the same quiet satisfaction, the pleasure of observing a healthy animal at rest. You take a step forward, and the straw crunches under your sandal. The horse does not react except to lower its head a fraction of an inch, a tiny relaxation that tells you it is ready for whatever you are going to do. You raise your right hand and place your palm flat on the horse's shoulder, the same gesture you made a moment ago, but now you let the hand rest there for a longer time, feeling the warmth of the skin, the texture of the short, fine hairs, the solid muscle underneath. The horse's coat is smooth and clean, the hairs lying flat in the direction of growth, and when you run your hand along the shoulder, you feel the slight oiliness of the natural coat, the lanolin-like substance that keeps the horse's skin healthy and repels water. Your hand moves slowly from the shoulder up to the base of the neck, where the muscle is thicker and the hair is slightly longer, forming a small crest that stands up under your palm. The horse stretches its neck forward and down, a long, slow movement that pulls the skin taut over the vertebrae, and you can feel the individual bones of the neck, the strong cervical vertebrae that support the heavy head and allow the horse to graze and drink, and turn its head in all directions. You run your hand along the crest of the neck, feeling the warmth increase as you move closer to the head, and then you withdraw your hand and let it rest again at your side. Now you begin the inspection. This is a routine you have performed thousands of times, a systematic check of every part of the horse's body to ensure that the animal is sound and ready for the day. You start at the head, standing at the horse's left shoulder and reaching forward to touch the forehead, the broad, flat space between the eyes that is called the poll. The skin here is thin and tight over the skull, and you can feel the ridge of bone that runs down the center of the forehead, a slight prominence that is different on every horse. The horse lowers its head further, bringing its muzzle close to your chest, and you can feel the warm breath on your hands as you move them down the face. You run your fingers over the nasal bones, the long, slender structures that form the bridge of the nose, feeling for any heat or swelling that might indicate a problem. There is none. The bones are cool and smooth under the skin, and the horse breathes evenly through wide, clean nostrils that flare gently with each inhalation. The nostrils are lined with soft, pink skin that is slightly moist, and you can see the fine network of blood vessels just beneath the surface. You touch the muzzle, the soft, velvety skin around the nostrils and lips, and the horse pushes its nose gently against your palm, a gesture of trust and affection that you have felt many times before. You allow the contact for a moment, feeling the warm, moist breath on your skin, and then you move on. Your hands travel down the left side of the horse's neck, following the line of the jugular groove where the great vein runs close to the surface. You can see the vein pulsing faintly under the skin, a steady, rhythmic beat that matches the horse's slow heart. Your fingers trace the groove without pressing hard, feeling the soft, elastic texture of the skin and the firm muscle beneath. You check the throat latch, the area where the head joins the neck, running your fingers around the curve of the jaw and feeling the lymph nodes, which are small and cool and freely movable under the skin. You check the windpipe, the rigid tube of cartilage that runs down the front of the neck, feeling each ring with the tips of your fingers and finding them all smooth and uniform. The horse swallows once as your fingers pass over the throat, a small involuntary motion that makes the larynx bob up and down, and then it stands still again. You move to the chest, the broad, muscular expanse of the pectorals that powers the horse's forward motion. The chest is warm under your hands, the skin slightly looser here than on the neck, and you can feel the great muscles shifting as the horse breathes. You place your palm flat on the left side of the chest, just behind the elbow, and you feel the horse's heartbeat directly through the chest wall. The beat is slow and strong, a deep, resonant thump, thump, thump that you can count. You do not count, you simply feel the rhythm for a few moments, confirming that it is regular and unhurried, the heart of a fit animal at rest. The horse stands perfectly still while you do this, its ears relaxed, its eyes half closed, accepting your touch as a normal part of the morning. Now, you move to the legs, the most important part of the inspection. You begin with the left foreleg, starting at the top where the leg joins the body. You run your hands down from the elbow, feeling the triceps muscle and the point of the elbow, the bony prominence that is cool and hard under the skin. You move down to the knee, the complex joint that absorbs the shock of every stride, and you cup your hands around it, feeling for any heat or swelling. The knee is cool, the skin over it slightly loose, and the bones underneath are hard and well-defined. You run your fingers along the cannon bone, the long, straight bone between the knee and the fetlock, feeling the smooth, dense surface through the thin layer of skin. The horse's leg is clean, the tendons behind the cannon bone standing out like taut cords, and you can feel each one individually as you run your fingers down the back of the leg. The tendons are cool and firm, with no sign of the spongy swelling that would indicate strain or injury. You reach the fetlock, the joint at the bottom of the cannon bone, and you flex it gently with your hand, feeling the smooth articulation of the bones and the springy resistance of the ligaments. The horse does not react. The joint moves freely and without pain. Now you lift the hoof. You run your hand down the back of the leg and grasp the fetlock, and you apply a gentle pressure. The horse responds immediately, lifting the hoof off the ground and holding it there for you to examine. The hoof is warm in your hand, the horn slightly damp from the straw, and you crouch down to bring it closer to your eyes. The hoof is dark, a deep charcoal color, and the surface is smooth except for the fine lines that run from the coronet down to the toe. You use the tip of your finger to clean out the cleft of the frog, the V-shaped structure on the underside of the hoof, removing a small bit of pack straw that had lodged there overnight. The frog is firm and rubbery, the heel bulbs are full and plump, and the sole of the hoof is slightly concave, the way it should be. The shoe is still firmly attached, the nails driven cleanly into the hoof wall and clinched over on the outside, and the shoe itself shows only minimal wear. You set the hoof down gently, placing it back on the straw, and the horse shifts its weight back onto the leg. You repeat the same process on the right foreleg, running your hands down from the elbow to the knee, from the knee to the cannon bone, from the cannon bone to the fetlock. You feel the same cool, firm tendons, the same smooth bone, the same freely moving joint. You lift the right hoof and inspect it as you did the left, finding it clean and sound, the shoe tight, and the frog healthy. You set the hoof down and straighten up, your knees making a small popping sound that is the only noise in the quiet stall. Now you move to the hind legs. You walk around the horse, passing behind it with a hand trailing on its hip so that it knows where you are at all times. The horse does not startle. It is accustomed to your movements and trusts you completely. You stand at the left hind leg and begin your inspection at the hip, feeling the great gluteal muscles that power the horse's stride. The muscles are firm and well developed, and they quiver slightly under your touch as the horse balances on 3 legs. You move down to the stifle, the equivalent of the human knee, and feel the bony landmarks through the skin, then down the gaskin, the long, muscular calf, and then to the hock. The hock is a complex joint, and you examine it with particular care, feeling the cool, hard surfaces of the bones and the tight, springy ligaments that hold them together. The hock is clean and cool, with no fluid swelling. You move down the cannon bone and the fetlock, then lift the hind hoof. The hind hoof is slightly narrower than the front hoof, but otherwise similar, the horn healthy and the shoe secure. You set it down and repeat the process on the right hind leg, moving with the same slow, deliberate care. When the inspection is complete, you stand up straight and place your hand on the horse's back, just behind the withers. The horse has stood patiently throughout the entire process, its weight shifting occasionally but never pulling against your hands or showing any sign of impatience. The animal's coat is now slightly ruffled where your hands have passed over it, small patches of hair that stand up in the opposite direction of growth and will smooth down again in a few minutes. The stall is quiet, the only sounds the horse's slow breathing and the distant trickle of the fountain in the courtyard. The lantern outside continues to burn with a steady flame, casting its patterned light through the rails, and the grey light from the high window has grown slightly brighter, the squares of light on the back wall now more distinct. You stand there with your hand on the horse's warm back, feeling the slow rise and fall of its breathing, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of a task done well, a task that required nothing more than patience and attention and care, a task that has prepared the horse for the saddle and for the day ahead, even though the day itself has not yet fully arrived. The inspection is complete, and your hands have learned what they needed to learn. The horse is sound, its legs cool and clean, its body free of any hidden heat or swelling. You stand for a moment longer with your palm resting flat on the horse's back, just behind the withers, feeling the slow rise and fall of the ribs under the skin. The horse has not moved during the inspection, except to shift its weight from one leg to another, and now it stands with its head lowered slightly, its lower lip drooping in an expression of deep contentment. The bond between you and the animal is strongest in these quiet moments, when no demands are being made and no commands are being given, when the two of you simply exist together in the small, warm space of the stall. The lantern outside the rails continues to burn with a steady golden flame, and the grey light from the high window has brightened another degree, the squares of pale illumination on the back wall now clearly defined rectangles of cool, diluted dawn. The fountain in the courtyard murmurs on, a constant, gentle presence that underlies all the other sounds of the morning, and somewhere beyond the citadel walls a second rooster crows, its call distant and muffled, more a memory of a sound than a sound itself. You remove your hand from the horse's back and turn toward the stall door. The straw rustles under your sandals as you move, the dry, papery sound that has accompanied every step you have taken since you entered the stall. You lift the wooden latch with a simple upward motion of your thumb, and the door swings open on its leather hinges, which are made from old reins that have been repurposed and oiled until they are soft and silent. You step out of the stall and into the courtyard, leaving the door slightly ajar behind you, so that the horse can see the light and hear the sounds of the morning. The courtyard air is cooler than the air inside the stall, and it carries the full mixture of the morning's scents, the jasmine, the hay, the dust, the water from the fountain, and now, as you walk across the packed earth toward the tack room, the faint, pleasant smell of leather and oil that grows stronger with each step. The tack room is at the far end of the courtyard, a small chamber built into the thickness of the outer wall. Its door is always left ajar to allow air to circulate and prevent the leather from growing moldy in the damp months of the Nile flood. You push the door open with the flat of your hand, and it swings inward without resistance, the iron hinges moving smoothly in their oiled sockets. Inside, the air is still and cool and saturated with the rich, complex fragrance of worked leather, a smell that is composed of many layers, the sharp, clean note of neat's foot oil, the earthier scent of tanned cowhide, the faint sweetness of beeswax used to polish the straps, and underneath it, all the dusty, woody smell of the old timber shelves and the stone walls. The room is dark, with only a small, high window that looks out onto the arcade, and the light that comes through it is grey and indirect, barely enough to see by. You will need the lantern, which you left hanging outside the stall, and so you turn back to retrieve it. The walk back across the courtyard is slow and unhurried, your sandals making a soft rhythmic sound on the packed earth. You pass the fountain, where the water still spills from the central spout in its endless, patient arc, and you pass the grey mare's stall, where she has turned around and is now facing the back wall, her tail swishing slowly from side to side. You reach your horse's stall and lift the lantern from the stone ledge where you placed it, feeling the warmth of the brass handle against your palm. The flame inside the lantern wobbles slightly as you move it, then steadies again, and the patterned light dances across the ground at your feet. You carry the lantern back across the courtyard, retracing your steps, and this time you enter the tack room with the warm golden light pushing ahead of you and illuminating the interior. The tack room is a neat, orderly space, every item in its designated place. Along the left wall runs a long wooden rack with pegs for hanging bridles and halters, and each peg holds its assigned piece of equipment, the leather straps hanging straight and untangled. Along the right wall are shelves made of thick planks of acacia wood, and on these shelves rest the folded saddle blankets, the spare girths, the tins of oil and wax, the squares of cleaning cloth, and all the other small necessities of horse care. In the center of the room, at waist height, runs a single wooden rail supported by iron brackets, and on this rail rest the saddles, each one covered with a light linen cloth to keep off the dust. The saddles are arranged in a row, each one belonging to a specific horse and a specific rider, and each one slightly different in shape and size and the pattern of wear on the leather. Your saddle is the third one from the left, and you know its shape so well that you could identify it by touch alone in complete darkness. But you are not here for the saddle, not yet. You are here for the grooming tools. On the wall to the right of the door, hanging from a series of small iron hooks, are the brushes and curry combs that you and the other horsemen use to groom your horses. The brushes are of several types: stiff bristled body brushes for removing dried sweat and dirt, softer finishing brushes for bringing a shine to the coat, and small delicate brushes for cleaning the face and the legs. The curry combs are made of woven palm fiber, stiff and springy, shaped into ovals that fit neatly in the palm of the hand. You select the body brush first, a round, flat-backed brush with bristles made of Tampico fiber, a stiff, resilient material that is good for loosening dirt and dried sweat. The wooden back of the brush is smooth and dark, polished by the oil of countless hands, and it fits into your palm as if it were made for you. You take the brush down from its hook and test the bristles against your fingers, feeling their stiffness, their slight scratchiness, the way they spring back when pressed. The brush is clean and dry, ready for use. Next, you select the curry comb. The curry comb is a simple tool, a pad of woven palm fiber about the size of your hand, with a loop of leather on the back that you slip your fingers through to hold it in place. The palm fibers are light brown and slightly glossy, and they have been woven together in a tight, dense pattern that creates a rough, textured surface. The curry comb is used to loosen the dirt and dried sweat from the horse's coat before the brush sweeps it away, and it is also used to clean the brush itself, drawing out the dust and hair that accumulate in the bristles. You slip your fingers through the leather loop and close your hand around the pad, feeling the rough texture against your palm, the slight give of the fibers when you squeeze. The curry comb is light and easy to hold, and it has the faint, sweet smell of dried palm leaves. You carry the brush and the curry comb back across the courtyard, the lantern once again left hanging on its hook outside the stall. The light is stronger now, the grey of dawn giving way to the first hints of colour, and you can see the courtyard more clearly than before. The jasmine leaves are now distinctly green, the packed earth now a warm tan, the limestone pillars now a pale honey colour where they catch the light. The horses in the other stalls are all awake now, some of them watching you with calm, dark eyes, others nuzzling at the hay in their mangers, or taking long, slow drinks from their water buckets. The morning is progressing at its own pace, and you are part of that progression, a small figure moving through the ritual tasks that make up your day. You enter the stall and close the door behind you, the latch falling into place with a soft click. The horse turns its head to look at you, its ears pricking forward with mild interest as it sees the tools in your hands. The horse knows what the brush and curry comb mean. It has been groomed thousands of times, and the sensation is familiar and pleasant. You set the curry comb down on the ledge of the manger, where it will be within easy reach, and you take the body brush in your right hand. You begin at the horse's neck, standing at the left side, and you place the brush against the skin just behind the base of the ear. The first stroke is long and even, following the direction of the hair from the poll down toward the shoulder. The bristles make a soft, shushing sound as they pass over the coat, a sound that is somewhere between a whisper and a rustle, and they leave behind a faint track where the hair has been smoothed flat. You lift the brush at the end of the stroke and bring it back to the starting point, then make a second stroke parallel to the first, overlapping it by half the width of the brush. The motion is rhythmic and steady, a slow, deliberate cadence that you could maintain for hours without tiring. The horse stands perfectly still, its ears relaxed, its eyes beginning to half close in pleasure. The grooming is a form of massage, the stiff bristles stimulating the skin and the muscles underneath, and the horse responds with a deep, slow exhalation that stirs the straw at its feet. You continue down the neck, stroke after stroke, each one following the curve of the muscle. The brush picks up a fine grey dust as it moves, the accumulation of the night's dander and the tiny particles of chaff that have settled on the horse's coat. This dust rises in faint, invisible clouds that you can smell more than see, a dry, clean scent that mingles with the other smells of the stall. After every few strokes, you take the curry comb in your left hand and draw the bristles of the brush across its rough surface, a quick, scraping motion that pulls the dust and hair out of the bristles and leaves them clean. The curry comb makes a soft, tearing sound as the bristles pass over it, and the dust that falls from it is fine and pale, settling onto the straw and disappearing. You tap the curry comb against the wooden heel of your sandal to dislodge the last of the dust, a small, sharp knock that is the only percussive sound in the otherwise quiet stall, and then you continue brushing. From the neck, you move to the shoulder, the large muscular triangle that powers the horse's forward motion. The hair here is slightly longer than on the neck, and it takes a few more strokes to smooth it down. You brush in long, sweeping arcs that follow the shape of the muscle, from the withers down to the point of the shoulder, from the shoulder blade back toward the ribs. The horse shifts its weight slightly, leaning into the pressure of the brush, and you can feel the animal's enjoyment as a subtle relaxation in the muscles under your hand. The shoulder is a favorite spot for grooming, a place where the horse cannot reach with its own teeth or hooves, and the attention you give it is received with quiet gratitude. You move to the barrel, the long curved expanse of the rib cage that forms the main body of the horse. The brush strokes here are longer, sweeping from the top of the ribs down to the belly line, following the curve of the barrel. You can feel each rib through the skin, a series of parallel ridges that rise and fall under the bristles. The horse breathes in and out, and the ribs expand and contract under your brush, a slow living rhythm that you match with your strokes. You work your way along the barrel from front to back, overlapping each stroke with the one before, covering every inch of the coat. The dust is thicker here than on the neck, and you clean the brush more frequently, drawing it across the curry comb and tapping the comb against your sandal. The fine grey powder that falls from the comb accumulates on the straw, and you shuffle your feet to work it down into the bedding where it will not rise again. From the barrel, you move to the hindquarters, the great, rounded muscles of the croup and the thigh that provide the horse with its speed and power. The horse is particularly sensitive here, and you lighten the pressure of the brush slightly, letting the bristles just skim over the skin. The hair on the hindquarters is short and fine, and it takes a shine quickly under the brush, the natural oils of the coat being distributed along the length of each hair. You can see the shine beginning to emerge as you work, a subtle, healthy gloss that catches the lantern light and makes the chestnut coat glow like polished wood. The horse swishes its tail once, a slow, lazy movement that sends a few loose hairs drifting into the air, and then it stands still again. You work your way down the left hind leg, using shorter, more careful strokes on the delicate area around the hock and the cannon bone. You brush the leg from the top down, following the direction of the hair, and you use the tips of the bristles to clean around the fetlock and the pastern, where the hair is longer and often traps bits of straw. You lift the hoof once more, not for a full inspection this time, but simply to brush away a small piece of chaff that is stuck to the heel bulb, and then you set it down and move on. Now you walk around to the right side of the horse, trailing your hand along the animal's hindquarters and back as you pass behind it. The horse does not move. Its trust in you absolute. You begin on the right side of the neck, working with the same slow rhythmic strokes, the same pattern of brush and currycomb. Brush and currycomb. Brush and currycomb. The right side of the horse is slightly dirtier than the left, perhaps because the animal slept on that side during the night, and there is a patch of flattened hair on the barrel where the body pressed against the straw. You spend extra time on this patch, using the currycomb directly on the coat to loosen the flattened hairs and then following with the brush to smooth them down. The horse leans into the currycomb, its muscles twitching in pleasure, and you can feel the tension leaving the animal's body under your hands. You work your way down the right foreleg and the right hind leg, giving each the same careful attention as the left. The joints are cool and clean, the tendons firm, the hooves sound, and the grooming confirms what the inspection already told you. The horse is in perfect condition, ready for whatever the day may bring. You finish the right side and step back to survey your work. The horse's coat now has a uniform, healthy sheen, the chestnut color, deepened and enriched by the brushing. The hairs lie flat and smooth, all pointing in the direction of growth, and the animal seems to glow in the soft combined light of the lantern and the growing dawn. You set the body brush down on the manger ledge and pick up the finishing brush, a softer brush made of horsehair bristles that are light brown and flexible. This brush is used for the final polish, for removing the last traces of dust and bringing the coat to a deep mirror-like shine. You begin again at the neck, this time using very light pressure, letting the soft bristles barely skim over the surface of the coat. The finishing brush makes a sound that is even softer than the body brush, a faint, silky whisper that is barely audible over the horse's breathing. You work your way over the entire horse, from neck to shoulder, to barrel to hindquarters, from left side to right side, and with each stroke the shine deepens, the coat reflecting the light in a way that is beautiful and deeply satisfying. When you have finished with the finishing brush, you pick up a small soft cloth from the manger ledge and use it to wipe the horse's face, gently cleaning around the eyes and the nostrils and the soft velvety muzzle. The horse closes its eyes as you wipe around them, trusting you completely, and when you are done it opens them again and looks at you with a calm, steady gaze. You hang the brushes back on their hooks in the tack room, and you return to the stall with a clean linen cloth to wipe the dust from your own hands. The grooming is complete, and the horse is ready for the saddle. The morning has moved forward another step, and the world outside the courtyard is beginning to stir, but inside the stall there is only the quiet, the warmth, and the deep shared peace between you and the animal that you have cared for with your own hands. The grooming has left your hands with a faint, pleasant residue of horsehair and dust, a fine grey powder that clings to the creases of your palms and the spaces between your fingers. You wipe your hands on the linen cloth that you keep folded on the manger ledge, a cloth that is soft from many washings and has the same clean, sun-dried scent as your tunic. The cloth removes most of the dust, though a slight dryness remains on your skin, a reminder of the work you've just completed. The horse stands behind you in the stall, its coat now gleaming with a deep, healthy shine that seems to hold the lantern light and return it in a soft, coppery glow. The animal is completely relaxed, its head lowered, its weight resting on 3 legs, with the 4th hoof cocked in rest, its tail hanging straight and still. The stall is quiet except for the horse's slow breathing and the distant trickle of the fountain. You fold the linen cloth and set it back on the ledge. Then you turn and lift the latch of the stall door, stepping out into the courtyard once more. The morning has continued its slow advance while you were inside the stall. The sky overhead is now a pale, washed blue, the color of watered milk, and the few high clouds that were invisible in the darkness now show themselves as thin streaks of white, stretched across the sky from east to west, like the brushstrokes of a painter who is not quite finished with the canvas. The stars have all disappeared, even the bright planet that hung low in the east, and the light that fills the courtyard is a cool, diffuse radiance that seems to come from everywhere, at once and nowhere in particular. The arcade pillars cast soft, blurred shadows on the packed earth, shadows that are not yet sharp, but will become so when the sun finally rises above the citadel walls. The jasmine flowers, now visible as tiny white stars among the dark green leaves, release their fragrance more strongly as the air warms, and the scent drifts across the courtyard in invisible waves that you walk through without noticing because you have breathed this scent every morning for years. You cross the courtyard in a diagonal line, your sandals leaving faint prints in the earth that will be swept away by the stable hands when they begin their morning duties. The ground is firm underfoot, the packed surf is slightly cool where the night air has settled into it, and you can feel the slight give of the gravel in places where the earth is not as tightly compressed. The fountain continues its quiet murmur, and as you pass it you catch a glimpse of the water in the basin, now reflecting the pale blue sky and the underside of the arcade roof, the reflection shimmering and reforming with each ripple. The grey mare watches you from her stall, her large head resting on the top of the low door, and her ears swivel forward as you pass, tracking your movement with calm curiosity. You do not stop, but you feel her gaze on your back as you continue toward the tack room, a familiar sensation that is as much a part of the morning as the sound of the fountain. The tack room door is still ajar, exactly as you left it after returning the brushes. You push it open with the flat of your hand and step inside, and the rich, complex smell of leather and oil and old wood wraps around you like a second garment. The lantern, which you have carried with you from the stall, hangs from a hook just inside the door, and its warm, golden light pushes back the shadows and reveals the orderly interior of the small room. The shelves are lined with folded blankets and tins of oil. The pegs hold their bridles and halters in straight, untangled lines, and the saddles rest on the central rail under their linen covers, each one a dark, quiet shape waiting to be claimed. You close the door behind you, not fully, but enough to keep the lantern light from spilling out into the courtyard and disturbing the stillness of the morning, and you stand for a moment in the small, enclosed space, breathing in the scent of leather and letting your eyes adjust to the dimness. Your saddle is the third one from the left on the central rail. It rests on the rail exactly as you left it the evening before, covered with a light linen cloth that is the color of unbleached cotton. The cloth is a simple square of fabric, large enough to drape over the entire saddle and hang down on both sides, and it serves to keep the dust off the leather during the night. The dust in the courtyard is always present, a fine pale powder that rises from the packed earth and settles on every surface, and if the saddle were left uncovered it would need to be wiped down every morning. The linen cloth is an old one, its edges slightly frayed where the threads have loosened over time, and it has a small darned patch in one corner where a tear was repaired with neat, tiny stitches. You reach out and touch the cloth, feeling the soft, slightly rough texture of the linen, the familiar weight of the fabric as it drapes over the saddle beneath. You lift the cloth carefully, taking hold of the front edge with both hands and raising it upward and backward, folding it in half as you go. The saddle is revealed by degrees. First the pommel, the high, curved front of the saddle that rises like the prow of a small boat, then the seat, the smooth, dark hollow where you will sit, then the cantle, the raised back that supports your lower spine, and finally the skirts, the broad flaps of leather that hang down on either side and protect the horse's sides from the stirrup straps. The linen cloth comes away completely, and you fold it into a neat square, tucking the frayed edges inside so that they do not catch on anything. You set the folded cloth on the shelf beside the saddle blankets, where it will wait until evening when you cover the saddle again at the end of the day. Now you look at the saddle. The lantern light falls on it from the side, casting long, soft shadows across the leather and highlighting the contours of the seat and the pommel. The saddle is a Mamluk Horseman saddle, designed for riding with short stirrups and a deep seat. A saddle that allows you to stand in the stirrups and shoot a bow or swing a sword while the horse moves beneath you. It is built on a wooden frame, a tree made of laminated strips of beechwood that have been shaped and steamed and bent into the proper curve. The wood is completely hidden beneath the leather, but you know it is there, and you can feel its solidity when you press your hand against the pommel. The leather that covers the frame is dark brown, almost black in the dim light, and it has a rich, warm sheen that comes from years of oiling and polishing and the natural oils of your own hands. The surface is smooth, with a fine grain of the cowhide still visible in places, a pattern of tiny pores and lines that is as unique as a fingerprint. You step closer to the saddle and rest your hand on the pommel. The leather is cool to the touch, having sat in the unheated tack room all night, and it is smooth and hard, molded to the shape of the wooden frame beneath. The pommel rises in a gentle curve from the front of the seat, and its top edge is rolled and stitched, a thick, rounded rim that you can grip with your hand when you mount or when the horse moves suddenly. The stitching on the pommel is even and tight, a line of small, precise holes through which the waxed linen thread passes in a regular pattern. You run your thumb along the stitching, feeling the slight ridge where the thread sits proud of the leather, feeling the smoothness of the wax that has been rubbed into the thread to protect it from moisture. The stitching is old, but it shows no signs of fraying or loosening. It was done by a master saddler whose hands knew their work, and it will hold for many years yet. Your hand moves from the pommel to the seat. The seat is the part of the saddle where you spend most of your time, and it has been shaped by the weight of your body over countless hours of riding. The leather here is slightly softer than on the pommel, and it has a subtle depression in the center where your weight has compressed the padding beneath. The padding is made of felted wool, a thick layer of it that cushions your seat bones and absorbs the shock of the horse's movement, and you can feel its springiness when you press down with your palm. The seat leather is smooth and dark, polished to a soft gloss by the friction of your clothing, and it has a few fine cracks around the edges where the leather flexes with the movement of the tree, cracks that are only on the surface and do not go through to the padding beneath. You run your hand over the seat, feeling the slight warmth that your touch imparts to the cool leather, tracing the gentle curve from front to back. The cantle rises at the rear of the seat, a low, curved ridge that supports your lower back. The cantle is not as high as the pommel, but it is thicker, padded more heavily to provide a comfortable backrest. The leather on the cantle is stitched in a different pattern from the pommel, a series of small diamonds that add strength and decoration, and the stitches are slightly darker than the leather, a dark brown against the lighter brown of the surrounding hide. You run your fingers over the diamond pattern, feeling the texture of the stitching, the slight roughness of the thread against the smooth leather. The cantle is firm and unyielding, a solid anchor that will keep you in place when the horse gathers itself for a leap or a sudden turn. Now your attention moves to the skirts. The skirts are the large flat flaps of leather that hang down from the sides of the saddle, covering the horse's ribs and protecting them from the stirrup straps and the buckles. The skirts on this saddle are made from a single piece of thick, supple leather, cut in a gentle curve that follows the shape of the horse's barrel. The edges of the skirts are bound with a narrow strip of lighter leather, stitched in place with tiny, even stitches that run all the way around the perimeter. The binding is slightly worn in places, the lighter color darkened by dirt and oil, but it is still intact and still doing its job of protecting the raw edge of the leather from fraying. You lift one of the skirts and let it fall back, feeling its weight, the way the leather drapes heavily over your hand. The underside of the skirt is rough, the natural surface of the hide left unfinished to provide grip against the saddle blanket, and when you run your fingers over it, you can feel the Swede-like nap that will hold the blanket in place and prevent the saddle from slipping. Beneath the skirts, attached to the wooden tree, are the girth straps. The girth straps are 3 on each side, made of doubled strips of heavy leather that have been stitched together with the same strong, waxed thread. The straps hang down from the saddle, their ends cut into pointed shapes and pierced with holes for the girth buckle. The leather of the straps is stiff and thick, much thicker than the leather of the skirts, and it has a darker color, almost black, from the many applications of oil that have been worked into it to keep it strong and pliable. You take hold of one of the straps and bend it, feeling the resistance of the heavy leather, the way it creaks softly as the fibers stretch and compress. The holes in the strap are punched cleanly, their edges smooth and slightly stretched from the pressure of the buckle tongue, and you can see the faint circular impression where the buckle has rested in the same position for a long time. You check each strap in turn, running your fingers along their length to feel for any thin spots or cracks, and you find none. The straps are in good condition, strong and reliable, ready to hold the saddle in place against the horse's body. The stirrup leathers hang from the saddle tree just behind the pommel, looped over the wooden bars that are built into the frame. The leathers are long strips of heavy cowhide, wider at the top where they attach to the tree and tapering to a narrower width where they pass through the stirrup irons. The leathers are adjustable, with a series of holes and a brass buckle that allows you to change their length to suit your leg. You pull one of the leathers straight and examine it, running your thumb along the edge and feeling the smooth, burnished surface. The leather here is more flexible than the girth straps, having been worked back and forth many times, and it has a soft, supple feel that comes from being folded and unfolded every day. The buckle is made of brass, a simple square frame with a tongue that engages with the holes, and it has a warm golden color that catches the lantern light. The brass is polished by use, the edge is smooth, and the tongue moves freely on its hinge with a tiny, precise movement. The stirrups themselves are not attached at the moment. They hang from a hook on the wall nearby, waiting to be slipped onto the leathers. But the leathers are here, and you check them with the same care that you have given to every other part of the saddle. You run your fingers along the stitching that attaches the top of the leather to the loop that goes over the tree bar, feeling the tight, even stitches and the smoothness of the leather. You check the holes for signs of wear, the slight elongation that can happen over time as the buckle tongue pulls against the leather, and you see that the holes are still round and clean, the leather around them firm and uncracked. Beneath the saddle, resting on the rail, is the saddle blanket that you will use. The blanket is a separate item, but it is part of the saddle's equipment, and you glance at it as you continue your inspection. The blanket is made of thick wool felt, dyed a deep indigo blue, and it is folded in half lengthwise on the rail. You will unfold it later when you place it on the horse's back, but for now you simply note its presence, the rich color and the clean woolly scent that rises from it. You step back from the rail and look at the saddle as a whole. The lantern light plays over its surfaces, catching the highlights on the pommel and the cantle, deepening the shadows under the skirts, glinting on the brass buckles. The saddle is a beautiful object, not in an ornamental way, but in the way that all well-made tools are beautiful, each part shaped to its purpose, each piece of leather cut and stitched with care and attention. It is a saddle that has traveled far, across deserts and through mountains, along the banks of the Nile and through the crowded streets of Cairo, and it bears the marks of its travels, a scuff on the pommel where a tree branch once scraped against it, a slightly lighter patch on the seat where a drop of something hot once fell and was quickly wiped away, a faint network of fine lines on the skirts where the leather has flexed and creased with the horse's movement. These marks are not flaws, they are the record of a life lived, the proof that the saddle has served its purpose well. You reach out and take hold of the saddle with both hands. Your right hand grips the pommel, your fingers curling around the rolled edge, and your left hand slides under the cantle, finding the balance point where the weight is evenly distributed. You lift the saddle from the rail, and it comes up easily, the wooden rail releasing it without resistance. The saddle is heavy, perhaps 20 pounds of leather and wood and metal, but it is a familiar weight, a weight that you have lifted thousands of times and that your body knows exactly how to carry. You hold the saddle against your right hip, the pommel resting against your waist and the skirts hanging down over your thigh, and you feel the solid, reassuring pressure of it against your body. The leather is cool against your arm, and the smell of it is stronger now that it is close to your face, the rich, oily scent of neat's foot and beeswax, and the faint animal smell of the horse that still clings to the underside of the skirts. You turn toward the door of the tack room, careful not to bump the saddle against the door frame or the shelves. The lantern is still burning on its hook, and you pause for a moment to look at it, knowing that you will need to extinguish it later, but not yet. The flame flickers as you move past, casting a dancing shadow of the saddle onto the wall, a distorted silhouette that is larger than the saddle itself, its pommel and cantle stretched into strange, elongated shapes. You push the door open with your elbow, and you step out into the courtyard, carrying the saddle with you. The courtyard is brighter now, the pale blue of the sky having lightened further, and the shadows under the arcade have shortened as the sun approaches the horizon. The air is still cool, but there is a promise of warmth in it, a hint of the heat that will come later in the day when the sun is fully up and the stones of the citadel begin to radiate the stored heat of yesterday. The fountain continues its quiet song, and the horses in the stalls have begun to move about more actively, some of them stamping their feet gently or nudging their mangers for the last strands of hay. You cross the courtyard with the saddle cradled against your hip, your sandals leaving their soft prints in the earth, and you head toward the stall where your horse waits, its copper-colored coat gleaming in the growing light, its calm dark eye watching your approach with the same steady patience it has shown all morning. You carry the saddle across the courtyard with its weight settled comfortably against your right hip, the pommel pressing into the soft flesh just above your hip bone, and the skirt swaying gently with each step. The packed earth is cool under your sandals, and the light has continued to change while you were in the tack room, the sky now a uniform pale blue that seems to have been washed clean by the departing night. The arcade pillars cast shadows that are sharper now, their edges more defined, and the jasmine flowers on the vines have opened a little further, releasing their fragrance in gentle pulses that the light breeze carries across the courtyard. You pass the fountain without stopping, that the sound of the water draws your attention for a moment, the endless, patient spill from the spout into the basin, and you see the reflection of the sky in the water, a pale disk of blue that trembles with each ripple. The grey mare has turned around in her stall and is now facing the courtyard again, her large dark eyes following you as you pass, and you can hear the young bay gelding in the next stall shifting his weight and blowing a soft breath through his nostrils. Your horse is waiting in the third stall, its head turned toward the door, its ears pricked forward with the quiet attentiveness of an animal that knows the routine and is ready for the next step. When you reach the stall, you do not enter immediately. Instead, you lift the saddle from your hip and place it on the wooden rail that runs along the outside of the stall door, a rail designed specifically for this purpose. The rail is made of a single piece of acacia, smooth and dark with age, and it is set into the limestone pillars at either end with iron brackets. The saddle rests there securely, its skirts hanging down on both sides, its pommel and cantle rising above the rail like the peaks of a small, leather-covered mountain. You take a moment to adjust the saddle's position, making sure it is balanced and will not tip, and then you step back and look at it, this object that you have just carried across the courtyard and that will soon be on your horse's back. The leather glows softly in the growing daylight, the dark brown warmed by the first hints of the sun that is still hidden behind the eastern wall. The brass fittings on the girth straps catch the light and throw small bright reflections onto the limestone pillar beside them. Now you turn your attention to the stall door, lifting the wooden latch with the same easy motion you have used all morning. The door swings inward on its leather hinges, and you step inside. The stall is still warm from the horse's body, the air thick with the familiar smells of clean straw and horse and the faint, lingering scent of the brushing you have just completed. The horse stands exactly where you left it, its coat gleaming with the deep, coppery shine that you worked into it with the brushes. Its head now turns slightly to watch you enter. The animal's ears swivel forward, and it exhales a long, slow breath that stirs the straw near its muzzle. You close the door behind you, and the latch falls into place with a soft wooden click that is one of the most familiar sounds of your morning. The lantern, which you hung on the hook outside the stall when you went to the tack room, continues to burn there, its light now less necessary as the dawn brightens, but still a warm golden presence at the edge of your vision. Hanging from a wooden peg on the wall of the stall, near the manger, is the saddle blanket. The peg is a simple piece of wood driven into a hole drilled in the limestone, and it protrudes just far enough to hold the folded blanket without letting it touch the wall. The blanket is thick and heavy, made of wool felt that has been pressed and pounded until the fibers are densely matted together. Its color is a deep indigo blue, the dye made from the leaves of the indigo plant that grows in the fields along the Nile, and the color has faded slightly over time to a softer, more muted shade, like the sky at the very end of twilight. The edges of the blanket are bound with a narrow strip of undyed cotton, stitched in place with a simple running stitch that is neat and even, and the corners are slightly rounded where the blanket has been folded and unfolded many times. The blanket hangs there waiting, and you can smell it even from where you stand. The clean, woolly scent of the felt mixed with the fainter smell of the horse that it has been used on many times. A smell that is not unpleasant, but rather comforting, the smell of familiarity and continuity. You reach up and take the blanket from the peg, lifting it with both hands. The wool is heavy, much heavier than it looks, and the weight of it pulls your arms down slightly as you lower it from the peg. You hold the blanket in front of you, still folded as it has been since the evening before, a neat rectangle about the length of your forearm and the width of your shoulders. The fold runs lengthwise, and the outer surface of the blanket, the part that was exposed to the air all night, feels cool and slightly rough under your palms. You turn the blanket over in your hands, looking at it as if seeing it for the first time, though you have handled this same blanket on hundreds of mornings. The felt is thick and springy, and when you press your fingers into it, the fibers compress and then slowly spring back, leaving a faint depression that fades over a few seconds. The edges are straight and true, the cotton binding still firmly attached, and there are no thin spots or holes anywhere in the fabric. The blanket is in good condition, ready for another day of use. You carry the blanket to the center of the stall, where there is a small open space between the horse and the door, and you shake it out. The motion is gentle at first, a small up and down movement of your wrists that sends a wave rippling through the wool. The blanket billows slightly, opening up from its folded state, and a fine dust of chaff and horsehair rises from it, a tiny cloud of pale particles that glitter in the lantern light before settling back down onto the straw. You shake the blanket again, more vigorously this time, holding it by the corners and giving it a sharp snap that makes a soft, muffled whoomp in the quiet stall. The horse flicks an ear at the sound but does not move. It is accustomed to this noise and knows it means nothing alarming. The shaking fluffs the wool fibers, separating them from each other and restoring the loft that was compressed by a night of hanging on the peg. The blanket seems to grow slightly thicker in your hands, the felt becoming more airy and resilient, and the indigo color seems to deepen as the fibers separate and catch the light in new ways. You shake it once more, a final, gentle shake that settles the fibers into their new arrangement, and then you hold the blanket up in front of you, examining its surface. It is clean and even, with no wrinkles or folds, and it is ready to be placed on the horse's back. Now you must fold the blanket. This is a simple task, but you do it with the same slow, deliberate care that you bring to everything else this morning. You lay the blanket across your outstretched arms, letting it drape down on both sides like a thick blue shawl, and you find the center line that runs from one short edge to the other, an imaginary line that divides the blanket into two equal halves. You bring your hands together, folding the blanket along this line, and the two halves come together with a soft, muffled sound, the wool pressing against wool. You run your hand along the fold, pressing down firmly to create a sharp crease, and you check that the edges are aligned perfectly, the cotton bindings matching up exactly. The fold must be straight, because the fold will lie along the horse's spine, and any deviation will cause the saddle to sit crookedly, which could rub the horse's back and cause discomfort. You take your time with this, adjusting the fold by tiny increments, smoothing the wool with your palm, making sure that everything is exactly as it should be. The horse watches you with one dark eye, its ears relaxed, its breathing slow and even. When the fold is perfect, you carry the blanket to the horse's left side. You stand just behind the horse's shoulder, where you have stood for every step of the grooming and the inspection, and you hold the folded blanket in front of you with both hands. The horse does not move. It knows what is coming, and it accepts it with the same calm patience it has shown all morning. You lift the blanket and place it on the horse's back, just behind the withers, the high point of the shoulders where the neck joins the body. The blanket lands softly, with a barely audible rustle, and it sits there like a thick blue pad, the fold running along the spine, the two halves hanging down on either side of the horse's barrel. The wool immediately begins to warm from the horse's body heat, and you can see the slight indentation where the weight of the blanket presses down on the coat that you so carefully brushed just a short while ago. But placing the blanket is only the beginning. The true task, the one that occupies your attention for the next long, unhurried minutes, is centering the blanket. The blanket must lie exactly in the middle of the horse's back, with an equal amount hanging down on both sides and the front edge positioned just behind the withers. If the blanket is too far forward, it will press on the withers and cause pain. If it is too far back, the saddle will sit on the horse's loins, where the spine is weaker and cannot bear weight. So you adjust. You place your hand on the front edge of the blanket, just behind the withers, and you slide it backward, a fraction of an inch at a time, watching the way the wool moves over the horse's coat. The blanket glides easily over the short, smooth hairs, and you stop when the front edge is exactly where it should be, a finger's width behind the highest point of the withers. Then you walk around to the right side of the horse, trailing your hand over the horse's hindquarters as you pass behind it, and you examine the hang of the blanket on that side. The right half of the blanket hangs down over the ribs, covering the barrel, and you check that the bottom edge is parallel to the ground and that the blanket is not twisted or bunched anywhere. It is slightly too far forward on this side, the front edge creeping up toward the shoulder, and so you return to the left side and adjust again, pulling the blanket back by a tiny amount, then checking the right side again, then adjusting again. This process repeats several times, each adjustment smaller than the last, until the blanket is perfectly positioned. You step back and look at it from the front, standing just in front of the horse's nose and sighting down the line of the back. The fold of the blanket runs straight down the center of the spine, a dark indigo line that divides the horse's back into two equal halves. The two sides of the blanket hang evenly, the bottom edges at the same height, the front edges aligned with each other. You walk around to the rear and look from there, crouching down slightly to get a different perspective, and you confirm that the blanket is centered from back to front as well, the fold running true all the way from the withers to the loins. The horse stands perfectly still, its weight balanced, its head lowered slightly, and it flicks one ear back to listen to your movements and then flicks it forward again. Now you smooth the blanket. You place your palm flat on the left side of the blanket, just behind the withers, and you press down gently, smoothing the wool from the fold outward toward the bottom edge. Your hand moves slowly, tracing the contours of the horse's barrel, feeling the slight rise and fall of the ribs under the thick felt. The wool is warm now, having absorbed the horse's body heat, and it is soft and yielding under your hand. You smooth the entire left side, from front to back, working out any small wrinkles or air pockets that might have formed when you placed the blanket. The wrinkles are tiny, almost invisible, but you can feel them as slight irregularities in the surface of the wool, and you press them flat with the heel of your hand. The motion is repetitive and soothing, your hand moving in long, slow arcs from the spine down to the edge, over and over, until the left side of the blanket lies as smooth as a calm sea. Then you walk around to the right side and repeat the process, smoothing the wool from the fold outward, pressing out the tiny wrinkles, feeling the warmth of the horse's body through the thick felt. The horse sighs, a deep, slow exhalation that seems to come from somewhere deep within its chest, and it shifts its weight slightly, settling more comfortably onto all four legs. When both sides are smooth, you return to the left side and run your hand along the fold itself, tracing the line of the spine from the withers to the loins. Your fingertips follow the crease, feeling the slight ridge where the two halves of the blanket come together, and you press down along the entire length of the fold, ensuring that it is in full contact with the horse's back. The horse's spine is a series of bony projections that you can feel through the wool, a chain of small hard bumps that rise and fall under your fingers. The blanket must sit evenly on both sides of this chain, and you check this by placing your fingers on either side of the spine and pressing down, feeling the equal resistance of the wool on both sides. It is even, perfectly even, and you feel a small, quiet satisfaction at this, a satisfaction that is out of all proportion to the simplicity of the task, but that is nonetheless real and deep. You step back again and look at the blanket. It lies on the horse's back like a second coat, a thick blue layer that covers the barrel from the withers to the loins. The indigo color is striking against the chestnut coat, a cool dark blue that contrasts with the warm coppery brown of the horse. The edges of the blanket are straight and even, the cotton bindings making a neat pale border around the perimeter. The fold runs true down the center of the back, a line as straight as a plumb line, and the two sides hang down with perfect symmetry. The horse looks comfortable and unbothered, its coat protected from the saddle's weight by the thick felt, its skin able to breathe through the wool fibers. You have done this task many times, more times than you can count, but each time it feels the same, a small act of care that is simple and precise and deeply satisfying. The satisfaction is not pride. It is more like the feeling of a stone settling into its proper place in a wall, a sense of rightness and order that needs no audience and no praise. You stand beside the horse for a while longer, your hand resting lightly on the blanket, feeling the slow rise and fall of the horse's breathing through the wool. The stall is quiet. The only sounds the distant trickle of the fountain and the occasional soft stamp of a hoof from one of the other stalls. The lantern outside the door has begun to seem dimmer as the daylight grows, and soon you will extinguish it. The horse turns its head slightly and nudges your shoulder with its muzzle, a gentle, brief touch that is not a demand for anything but simply a recognition, a small gesture of connection that passes between the two of you and then is gone. You allow your hand to linger on the blanket for one more moment, and then you turn toward the stall door, ready to retrieve the saddle from the rail outside and complete the final steps of your morning's work. The blanket, smooth and centered and perfectly placed, waits on the horse's back, a quiet testament to the value of taking time, of doing a simple thing well, of beginning the day with patience and care. You stand beside your horse in the quiet stall, the saddle blanket smooth and centered on the animal's back, its deep indigo color, a calm contrast against the copper gleam of the coat you brushed to a soft shine earlier. The horse has not moved during your careful adjustments of the blanket, its weight balanced evenly on all four legs, its head lowered just enough to show that it is fully at ease. The lantern outside the stall door still burns with a steady flame, but the light it casts is now pale and thin against the growing daylight that fills the courtyard. Through the high window at the back of the stall, the sky has turned a shade of pale pearl, and the sharp edges of the wooden lattice cast a faint grey pattern on the limestone wall. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air that still lingers in the stall despite the warmth of the horse's body, and you turn toward the stall door. The saddle waits for you on the wooden rail just outside, exactly where you placed it a short while ago, its dark leather gleaming dully in the mixed light of lantern and dawn. You lift the latch and open the door just wide enough to slip through, closing it behind you with the same quiet click of wood on wood. The courtyard air feels fresher on your face, carrying the scent of jasmine and the distant mineral coolness of the fountain. You walk the 2 steps to the rail and stand before the saddle, looking at it once more. The pommel rises in a smooth, dark curve, the seat hollowed gently by years of use, the skirts hanging down like the folded wings of a large bird. You slide your right hand under the pommel and your left hand under the cantle, finding the balance point that you know so well, and you lift the saddle from the rail. The weight settles against your palms and forearms, a familiar heft that you have carried across this courtyard more times than you could ever count. You turn, holding the saddle against your body with the skirts brushing your thigh, and you push the stall door open with your shoulder, stepping back inside the warm, straw-scented space where your horse waits. The horse turns its head slightly as you enter, one dark eye watching the saddle with calm recognition. You carry the saddle to the left side of the horse, standing just behind the shoulder where you have stood for every other task this morning. You pause there, holding the saddle at waist height, feeling its weight and the slight creak of the leather as your grip shifts. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, you raise the saddle higher, lifting it over the horse's back. The saddle rises in an arc, clearing the top of the blanket, and you guide it downward with care, setting it gently onto the indigo wool. The leather touches the felt with a soft, muffled sound, and the saddle settles into place, the tree spreading its weight across the blanket, the skirts draping down on either side of the horse's barrel. The horse does not flinch or move. It simply exhales a long, slow breath that stirs the straw near its hooves. You let go of the saddle and step back just enough to look at it. The saddle sits on the blanket with the pommel aligned behind the withers, the seat running straight along the spine, the cantle rising at the rear. But it is not yet in its final position. It needs to be adjusted, settled into the precise spot where it will be most comfortable for the horse and most secure for you. You place your hand on the pommel and push gently backward, sliding the saddle along the blanket until the front of the tree sits exactly a finger's width behind the point of the withers. The blanket moves with the saddle, the wool fibers gripping the underside of the leather and preventing any slipping. You check the position from the front, sighting down the horse's neck to make sure the pommel is centered and straight. Then you walk around to the right side, trailing your hand along the horse's hindquarters as you pass behind it, and you examine the saddle from that angle. The right skirt hangs evenly, the right side of the seat is level, and the cantle is centered over the spine. You return to the left side and make one more tiny adjustment, nudging the cantle a fraction of an inch to the left, and then you are satisfied. Now you must secure the saddle. Dangling from the right side of the saddle, threaded through the bars of the tree, are the girth straps, 3 of them made of thick, dark leather that has been oiled until it is supple and strong. But before you can fasten the girth, you need to reach it from the left side. The girth itself hangs from the right straps, a long, wide band of heavy leather with a brass buckle at each end, and it has been draped over the right skirt, waiting for you to reach under the horse's belly and draw it across. You lean down slightly, bending at the waist, and you reach under the horse's barrel with your right hand. The horse's belly is warm against your arm, the short hairs of the coat soft against your skin. Your fingers find the girth where it hangs on the far side, and you grasp the cool, smooth leather and draw it toward you, pulling it under the horse's belly. The girth slides easily, its surface slick with years of oiling, and it emerges on the left side, the brass buckle glinting in the lantern light. You hold the girth in your left hand now, the wide strap crossing the horse's belly just behind the forelegs, and you look at the buckle that dangles from it, a simple square frame of brass with a heavy tongue that will engage with the holes in the girth strap. On the left side of the saddle, 3 girth straps hang down from the tree, each one slightly shorter than the last to allow for adjustment. You select the first strap, the one that hangs closest to the horse's elbow, and you lift it with your free hand. The leather is stiff but pliable, and you thread the end of the strap through the brass buckle on the girth, pushing the tongue through the hole that corresponds to the tension you want. You choose a hole that is slightly loose, because the girth will need to be tightened gradually, in stages, to avoid startling the horse or pinching the skin. The tongue of the buckle slides into the hole with a satisfying, precise click, and the girth is now attached, though not yet tight. You let the strap hang for a moment, and reach for the second strap, the middle one, and you thread it through the second buckle on the girth, which is a smaller secondary buckle designed to distribute the pressure. You choose the same hole as the first strap, keeping the tension even, and the buckle clicks into place. The girth now hangs loosely under the horse's belly, the saddle resting on the blanket with only a slight tension holding it in place. The horse flicks an ear back at the sound of the buckles, then flicks it forward again, unconcerned. Now you begin to tighten. You take hold of the first girth strap, the one you just fastened, and you pull downward with a slow, steady pressure. The leather slides through the buckle with a soft, creaking sound, the tongue moving from the loose hole to a tighter one, and the girth draws up against the horse's belly. You do not pull hard, you pull just enough to take up the slack, to bring the girth into gentle contact with the skin. The horse shifts its weight slightly, a tiny movement of the hind legs, and then it settles again, accepting the pressure. You engage the tongue in the new hole, and then you move to the second strap and repeat the process, pulling downward with the same slow, measured force until the girth is snug but not tight. The saddle now sits more firmly on the blanket, the tree pressing down into the wool, and you can feel the increased stability when you place your hand on the pommel and try to rock the saddle from side to side. It moves very little, the girth holding it in place, but there is still more tightening to be done. You pause for a moment, straightening up and resting your hand on the horse's shoulder. The horse turns its head and nudges your arm lightly with its muzzle, a brief, gentle touch, and then it turns back to face the front of the stall. You listen to the sounds of the morning, the fountain, the distant call of a bird from somewhere beyond the citadel walls, the soft rustle of straw in the next stall where the grey mare is shifting her weight. The lantern continues its steady, silent burning, the flame now almost invisible in the growing daylight. You take a slow breath and return your attention to the girth, knowing that the tightening must be done in stages, allowing the horse to adjust to the feeling of the saddle being secured, allowing the skin under the girth to settle without being pinched. You reach for the first strap again, and this time you pull with a firmer pressure, drawing the girth up by one more hole. The leather creaks softly, and the buckle tongue clicks into the new hole with a sound that is solid and reassuring. You check the tension by sliding 2 fingers between the girth and the horse's belly, just behind the elbow. The space is snug, your fingers fitting there with only a slight resistance, and you can feel the warmth of the horse's skin through the leather. You move to the second strap and tighten it to the same degree, the leather sliding smoothly, the brass buckle cool against your fingers. The horse breathes deeply, its ribs expanding against the girth and then relaxing, and you can feel the slight movement of the strap as the animal inhales and exhales. There is no sign of discomfort, no swishing of the tail, no flattening of the ears. The horse is accustomed to this, and it trusts you completely. Now you walk around to the right side of the horse once more, passing behind it with your hand on its hip, and you check the girth from the other side. The right side of the girth runs from the buckles on the left, under the belly, and up to the straps on the right side of the saddle, and you need to make sure that the girth is lying flat and untwisted, that the leather is smooth against the horse's skin, that the buckles on this side are properly aligned. You run your hand along the girth where it crosses the horse's ribs, feeling the broad, smooth strap, the slight warmth of the leather, the even pressure against the barrel. The girth is straight, with no folds or twists, and the edges are lying flat without digging in. You check the attachment on the right side, where the girth is fastened to the right-hand straps. These straps are the mirror image of the ones on the left, and they are currently hanging loose because you have not yet tightened them. The tightening you did on the left side pulled the girth across, but the right side still has some slack, and you will need to adjust it to ensure that the pressure is even on both sides of the horse's body. You reach up and take the first right side girth strap, which hangs from the tree near the horse's ribs. This strap is slightly shorter than the left side straps, designed to be tightened by pulling upward rather than downward, but the principle is the same. You thread the ends through the buckle on the girth, just as you did on the left, and you pull upward with a slow, steady pressure, taking up the slack until the strap is snug. The buckle tongue finds a hole, and you engage it with a soft click. You do the same with the second strap, pulling upward until the tension matches the left side, and then you check the entire girth by running your hand along its length, from left to right. The pressure is even, the leather smooth, the buckles all securely fastened. The saddle is now held firmly on the horse's back, the tree pressing evenly into the blanket, the skirts hanging straight and still. But there is one more step, a small but important one. You return to the left side and reach for the third girth strap, the one that hangs furthest back, near the horse's flank. This strap is a safety strap, a backup in case the main girth should fail, and it is attached to a separate, narrower girth that runs behind the main one. You take this strap and thread it through the buckle on the secondary girth, pulling it just tight enough to keep it in place, not so tight that it restricts the horse's breathing. The secondary girth is made of slightly softer leather, and it has a different, lighter feel in your hands. You fasten it with the same slow care, listening for the click of the buckle tongue, feeling the gentle tension as you test it with your fingers. The safety strap is secure, and the girth system is now complete. You straighten up and place both hands on the pommel, testing the stability of the saddle. You push down gently, then pull up, then rock the saddle from side to side. The saddle moves with the horse's body, a unified solid unit, the blanket and the girth working together to keep everything in place. The horse does not react to your testing, it simply stands there, its ears relaxed, its breathing slow and even. You can feel the animal's calmness radiating outward, a steady, patient presence that fills the stall and seeps into your own body, slowing your heart, deepening your breath. You remove your hands from the pommel and let them rest at your sides, and you stand for a while, doing nothing, just being in the quiet space with the horse and the saddle and the gentle, growing light of the morning. The girth will need one final check, one last tightening after the horse has walked a few steps, because the motion of walking settles the saddle and stretches the leather slightly, and you will do that later, before you mount. But for now, the saddle is on, the girth is fastened, and the horse is ready. The morning has progressed from darkness to pale dawn, from stillness to slow, deliberate action, and you are now near the end of your preparations. The lantern outside the stall has burned down slightly, the oil level lower in the reservoir, and soon you will extinguish it. But for this moment you simply stand beside your horse, your shoulder almost touching its warm, solid neck, and you let the peace of the completed task wash over you. A quiet, wordless satisfaction that is as much a part of the morning as the light and the air and the endless, patient murmur of the fountain in the courtyard. The saddle is secure on your horse's back, the girth fastened and the blanket centered, and you stand in the quiet stall with your hand resting lightly on the pommel, feeling the solid, reassuring weight of the leather and wood that you had just placed there. The horse has not moved during the tightening of the girth, except to shift its weight slightly and exhale a few long, slow breaths. And now it stands with its head lowered and its ears relaxed, the very picture of calm acceptance. The lantern outside the stall door continues to burn, but its flame has grown smaller and paler as the oil in the reservoir diminishes, and the light it casts is now barely distinguishable from the cool grey daylight that fills the courtyard and seeps through the gaps in the wooden rails. Through the high window at the back of the stall, the sky has turned from pale pearl to a soft, diluted gold, the colour that comes just before the sun breaks the horizon, and the lattice shadow on the limestone wall has sharpened, its edges now crisp and well-defined. The morning is advancing, and you are nearly finished with your preparations, but there remain a few small tasks, a few final checks that must be completed before you can declare the work done, and allow yourself to stand still and wait for the day to begin. You remove your hand from the pommel and turn your attention to the stirrup leathers. The leathers hang from the saddle tree just behind the pommel, long strips of heavy cowhide that are wider at the top where they loop over the bars of the tree and narrower at the bottom where they pass through the stirrup irons. You reach for the left stirrup leather, taking hold of it near the top where it emerges from beneath the skirt, and you pull it straight, feeling the weight of the stirrup iron that hangs at its lower end. The stirrup iron is not yet attached. It still hangs from its hook on the wall of the tack room, and you will need to fetch it shortly. But first you must check the leather itself, running your fingers along its length and feeling for any thin spots or cracks or loose stitching. The leather is warm and supple from years of use, the surface smooth and darkened by the oil from your hands, and the neatsfoot oil that you work into it periodically. You bend it slightly, watching the way the fibers flex and crease, and you see no signs of weakness. The holes for the buckle are round and clean, their edges smooth and unbroken, and the stitching that holds the top loop together is tight and even, each stitch lying flat against the leather with the waxed thread still intact. You run your thumb over the stitching, feeling the slight ridge of the thread, and you find it sound. You do the same with the right stirrup leather, taking it in your hand and pulling it straight, examining it with the same careful attention. The right leather is a mirror image of the left, made from the same piece of hide and worked in the same way, and it is in equally good condition. You let it hang free and watch it sway gently, the weight of the leather pulling it straight down toward the straw. Then you walk to the stall door and lift the latch, stepping out into the courtyard to retrieve the stirrup irons from the tack room. The courtyard is brighter now, the walls and pillars taking on a warm, honeyed tone as the approaching sunrise paints the limestone with its first direct light. The fountain continues its quiet, endless murmur, the water catching the golden light and scattering it into tiny, shifting points of brilliance that dance across the surface of the basin. The grey mare in the first stall has finished her hay and is now standing with her head over the door, watching the courtyard with calm, patient eyes, and the young bay gelding in the second stall has lain down again in his straw. his legs folded under him and his nose resting on the ground. You cross the courtyard with slow, even steps, your sandals making their soft, rhythmic sound on the packed earth, and you push open the door of the tack room. The small room is darker than the courtyard, the only light coming from the high window and from the lantern that you left burning outside the stall. But your eyes are well adjusted to the dimness, and you find the stirrup irons easily. They hang from a pair of iron hooks on the wall beside the saddle rail, each one a simple, heavy ring of forged steel with a flat bottom where your foot will rest. The steel is dark grey, almost black, with a slight mottled patina of age, and the surfaces are worn smooth by the soles of your sandals over many years. You lift the stirrups from their hooks, one in each hand, and feel their weight, the solid, cold heft of the metal, the slight clink as they touch each other. You carry them back across the courtyard and into the stall, closing the door behind you. You hang the right stirrup from the manger ledge for a moment and take the left stirrup in your hands. To attach it, you must thread the stirrup leather through the slot at the top of the iron, a narrow opening that is just wide enough for the leather to pass through. You take the end of the left stirrup leather, the narrow tapered end that is cut into a pointed shape, and you feed it through the slot from the outside to the inside, pulling it through until several inches of leather emerge on the other side. The leather slides through easily, the slot worn smooth by years of this same motion. You fold the end back on itself, bringing it up against the main body of the leather, and you thread it through the brass buckle that hangs just above the stirrup iron. The buckle is a simple square frame with a tongue, and you engage the tongue in the appropriate hole, the one that gives you the correct length for your leg. The hole is one of several, each one representing a slightly different stirrup length, and you choose the one that you always choose, the one that places the stirrup iron at exactly the right height for your foot to find it naturally when you mount. You secure the buckle and pull the loose end of the leather through the keeper, a small leather loop that holds the tail flat against the main strap and prevents it from flapping. Then you test the attachment by pulling down on the stirrup iron with your hand, putting your full weight into it, and the leather holds firm, the buckle solid, the stitching strong. The stirrup is now ready. You repeat the process with the right stirrup, taking the leather in your hand and feeding it through the slot in the iron, folding it back, threading the buckle, engaging the tongue in the correct hole. Your fingers,